Okay, that's what it should say. I believe that we are starting right now. Everybody, welcome, welcome, and welcome. Welcome to another episode of the BTR stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov. It is a great honor to be here with the amazing genius of animation, ultra creative, creating art, animation, comics, Nina Paley. I've known Nina since 2004 back in the New York animation community, and it is such a great honor to have Nina join us here. And we also have Chad Kaczynski for the first time as well. And joining us, of course, is the great Giovanni Panicietti. Guys, all the new people who are watching this right now, don't forget to subscribe. Go to our channel, subscribe. We are going to have an episode tomorrow, by the way, with no, not tomorrow, Thursday, with Aiden Paladin. So, two great, wonderful human beings in a row. I am so honored to be here with you guys. And don't forget to go to patreon.com/breaktherules, become a patron today, and you are going to get the following. You are going to get $20 tier, gives you my dad's beautiful wooden magnets. $30 reward gives you Giovanni's amazing prints. You can see them in action right here. $50 gives you a custom wooden magnet from my father, whatever you want. So there we go. And we also have Remus joining us as well. But let's start with Nina. Nina, you have been a gigantic inspiration to me, as I'm sure you have been to so many people all around the world. Like I said, when the internet archaeologists are going to dig things up, there's going to be so much noise that they find, but then they're going to find your work, and I think it's going to stand the test of time. It really is timeless. So the first question that I wanted to start out with, I guess it's just like a regular question for an interview, but what got you into animation in the first place?
Oh, wow. When I was growing up on public television, there was a show of European cartoons. I don't remember what it was called, but I was exposed to good cartoons that way. Also, they showed on a commercial station, Yellow Submarine every year. And I mean, kids were exposed to animation then. There was Bugs Bunny and whatnot on TV. But I did like the weird European stuff, and I really liked Yellow Submarine. When I was about 13, a neighbor lent me his Super 8 camera, and I was able to make my own animation with that. I did that for a couple years until it was very clear that I hit a wall, and living in a college town in central Illinois with no access to film resources, there was no place to take it. So at that point, I focused more on comics. I was about 15. But I'd always drawn. I always loved doing visual arts. And I just thought of animation as an aspect of that. So when I moved to San Francisco, I was living in San Francisco. Once again, I borrowed a friend's Super 8 camera. This was in 1998. And I just picked up where I left off when I was 13 or 14 and started with the clay things on the table with the Super 8. And this band, Nick Phelps and the Sprocket Ensemble, that composed and played live music to animation, I gave them this little Super 8 film that I made, and they showed it and had a live performance with it, and it was incredibly fun, and people loved it. And that was the sort of positive reinforcement that motivated me to do another and move to 16 millimeter film. And I never shot on 35 millimeter film, but I drew and scratched directly on 35 millimeter film because of that. Just by accident, I met somebody that was into IMAX film, in the IMAX film organization, and he suggested I try to draw on IMAX film. So I did that. I actually schmoozed my schmoozer off and flew to LA a bunch of times to get IMAX junk stock. I made a movie called Pandorama, which is a cameraless IMAX movie. As far as I know, it was the only totally cameraless IMAX movie anybody made, meaning that it was made via a contact print. Nobody knows what film is anymore, but this was very important back then. And then somebody embezzled a copy of Flash from his workplace, and I started using Flash, and it's been mostly digital tools since then.
I love Flash. Flash has been so amazing for me as well, growing up in the New York animation community with yourself, Signa Bauman, who gave me my first job, actually. So she gave me the job of painting cells back in 2004. And Bill Plimpton as well. You know, he's such an amazing dude, and he's been doing this longer than anyone I know. And just the idea that you by yourself can create all this work of art and have it be seen by people go into all these film festivals. Like, your work has been around so many different festivals, and Annecy, obviously, Sita Sings the Blues, it won there for Best in Show. And like, what was the experience that you got from the people at the festivals versus when you started putting your work online and seeing the reactions of the people there?
So Sita was a festival darling. There wasn't really anything like it at the time. And it was pretty clear to me that individuals could make feature animated films, but I was one of the first people to actually do it. So that impressed people. I don't think it's as impressive now, but back then it was. It actually was on film. I mean, you had to put it on 35 millimeter film as a projection format. And Flash was vector based, so you could actually export at high enough resolution to do that. Yeah, it did well at festivals, and the reason that I primarily distributed it online, that's a really long story. In 2008, the movie distribution business changed. It was actually facing a crisis. Where there had been tons of money, suddenly there was not tons of money, and there was like practically no money. So the previous year, there were all these stories of festival darlings that got these, $10 million distribution deals or something, or $20 million, huge distribution, not huge, but for an indie, huge. And by the time I reached the festivals, it was like, well, $10,000, which, was not enough to pay my rent in New York for 1 year. So however low the production costs of Sita Sings the Blues were, they were more than $10,000 just from rent. So there was no reason for me to sign with a distributor when they were offering so little money. And I considered what you actually got with a distributor. Meanwhile, I was using these songs, which I had no illusions about. I never believed they were in the public domain. I knew that they should be in the public domain, but I also knew that they weren't. And from the start of making Sita Sings the Blues, I worked with the intellectual property law clinic of American University. And the student lawyers there found the provenance of the songs. And if you go to sitasingstheblues.com, you can see this chart of which corporations own which percent of which song and which territories. It's really absurd.
And it's by Annette Hanshaw. How do you say her name?
Hanshaw. Annette Hanshaw. Yeah, the old songs by Annette Hanshaw.
And something there is free and something is copyrighted, right? So her singing, is that free and the lyrics are copyrighted, or how exactly does that work?
Her voice, yeah, so there's a number of rights associated with songs, including the master rights, which are the recordings themselves, and then various types of publishing rights, including mechanical and sync. So the issue was with the publishing rights. It was not with her renditions of these songs. That is a long story. In spite of the master right, I wouldn't say the master rights are free. They haven't been declared free. It's just that nobody really owns them. Like to assert owner, somebody would have to really do a lot of legal effort and probably it's a long story. They've presumably fallen. The problem is when things fall or should fall into the public domain, they're still not free in our copyright regime. We don't really respect public domain in this country, and people don't really quite comprehend it. There's this concept of orphaned works. So we might say that the master rights are perhaps orphaned, but they're not orphaned either. It's just that they weren't renewed. But it was in the state of New York, and this is like varies from state to state, and blah 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 blah. So music publishers don't want to deal with any gray area whatsoever, which is why no Annette Hanshaw records were available in the United States. And I got all of my recordings from record collectors, and also I believe there was a CD from Canada at the time that I used, but American CD producers they just don't want to deal with that. I have no problem dealing with that. I'm like, no, nobody owns this. They're public domain, but that's still different than free, right? Like something that is established free, that's more of a thing. But anyway, that wasn't the issue. The master rights weren't the issue. It was all the publishing rights. It was all the sync rights. We can go into the minutiae of copyright law, but suffice to say, it's stupid. And I've done this talk. Copyright is brain damage. And clearly I was radicalized by my experience navigating the copyright industry, and eventually all these people saying, yes, it's difficult, but it protects your work too, really made me start to think, does it protect my work? What does protecting my work actually mean? What does any of this mean? How have I benefited from copyright? Let me look at my, at the time, 20-year career in the copyright industries. Let me look at my archive of comics. Are these benefiting from copyright? And it took a really long time, but I was like, oh my God, no, I'm not. I've believed I've benefited from copyright this whole time, but all it's done is make my work obscure. All it's done is prevent people from using my comics. And but it took a long time. It took a lot of like chipping away and struggle. And I was a defender of copyright until I had this very difficult year, and I just woke up one day and it was like, I don't need this. This is harming me. It's not helping me. So.
Well, we have a comment over here from Super Iron Bob, who, by the way, I made a mistake last time. It was not Buff that became a $50 patron to BTR. It was Super Iron Bob. Super Iron Bob, you are the real MVP. You are giving us $50 patronage, and I appreciate that so much. $50 patrons get, by the way, guys, if you don't know, they get a completely custom wooden magnet, beautiful wooden magnet that my father Alexander Polyakov created. And anyway, Super Iron Bob says copyright law is a bloody mess and decided by litigation and super, super expensive thus. And then Info Warlock says as culture becomes more infantilized, media becomes more cartoonified. Well, we're gonna get into that. And Info Warlock, we need a new version of copyright law where everyone can use anything, but creators are still compensated accordingly. So what do you think of that?
That'll never happen.
We don't need copyright law. I'm a copyright abolitionist, and I would like to go away. That's totally unrealistic. I know that's not going to happen. Nonetheless, I would, if I'm going to say what I want, whether I can get it or not, it's like I would like there to be no copyright at all, because culture isn't property. It's just not. You cannot try to turn it into property. It's not its nature.
So this is similar to an argument I heard before, more from, let's say, an ANCAP point of view when we had Jeffrey Tucker on, who was talking about how when a work can be copied over and over again, it's not a tangible good anymore. Like it's not going to cost you anything for somebody else to make a copy of it. So I can definitely see your point there. I mean, there are people who treat it so, like, I know the Japanese, I mean, not to put like a whole, like a sweeping statement here, but I have noticed that Japanese creators on Twitter, if you use any image, like even like slightly modified or whatever, they consider it to be a great affront to them that somebody else would be using their image for something and profiting or benefiting in some way from exposing this image. Even in the case where you would say that, hey, this was created by so-and-so, go check out their stuff. Because I had an experience like that when this Japanese creator, when I posted like that image, like I just made it bigger and put like a on the thumbnail, then she or he or whatever, they went to YouTube and they put a strike on the channel, a copyright strike for that one thumbnail, which and I mean, thankfully they rescinded it, but it resulted in like of the possibility of like for 90 days not being able to stream. And
I wouldn't associate that with Japanese. There are copyright zealots in all countries. I mean, obviously in the United States.
But in terms of the relationship of the creators to, because this was for a VTuber, and Japanese VTubers are extremely popular amongst their audience, and she even said, like, this is something that I made for this VTuber, and only this VTuber is allowed to use it. So there may be, culturally speaking, maybe some kind of a, I don't know, just something having to do with this is something that I specifically made for this person. It's almost like some kind of a soul relationship. Like,
but American artists have that too. It's like there's, you know, there's fundamentalist Christians all over the world, right? Like there's,
True.
I mean, this is copyright as a religion. People believe that it's like some moral thing. They believe actually that their soul is harmed when people copy their work, or that the soul of their work is harmed, or that, you know, there's some like horrible harm that happens when people make copies. And that sort of ideology is very common in the US, it's common in Europe, it's common all over the place. Resistors to it there aren't that many, but you know, there are lots of them, not lots of them, but, you know, they seem to be fairly distributed throughout the world. We're all pretty rare. I mean, the US, it's like this shit was invented in the US. Americans love this, and they love going on moral tirades about copyright. Although they moved on to mostly to moral tirades about other things.
Well, we're going to get into that. And first, we have another comment from InfoWarlock. Japan is extremely protective, not just about intellectual property, but more specifically about non-Japanese profiting from Japanese products. It's protectionist policy in general. Lev, you have a point. You can't find most Japanese art on apps like Spotify from before the 90s. That's interesting. I mean, we have, like, on YouTube, I am a big fan of a lot of the city pop. I don't know, Nina, if you've heard of Plastic Love. Yes, I know, Gio. But, like, all of this stuff that came out in the 1980s when the Japanese were still riding their high from the good economy, and it showed in the music. You know, like, it was really, really well done pop music. That is nothing like what I've seen. You know, it's not Britney Spears. And people even say, like, Utada Hikaru is like the Japanese Britney Spears. Bullshit. Utada Hikaru is way better. Anyway,
I was not even following American pop music. I do not have my finger on the pulse of pop.
Well, you have great musical taste. Like, you've in all your movies. I mean, not just in the Henshaw, but in Sadomasochism, the tracks that you ended up picking. It's like, mwah. It's like,
thank you.
It's really amazing. So, Gio. And everybody else, by the way, if you have any questions about copyright before we move on, let me know. Any thoughts you guys may have right now.
Well,
and don't forget to subscribe.
And Patreon.
Yes.
Patreon.
No, it's difficult nowadays. It just, I don't know. I guess it's difficult because, like, you had in the 2010s, you had like the Tumblr culture of like recolors and all that. And it's like very cheap and lazy, obviously. Like, I do quite a bit of hate on those people, but it is true. I mean, copyright's almost impossible to enforce nowadays.
Yes.
And it's just the nature of digital technology. I mean, I feel like every artist, there's always there's a problem nowadays, and I cover this in my recent podcast with Matthew about this artist that blew up on Twitter doing these like ghastly still lifes. But never, I won't go into it. But it's almost like artists nowadays have this expectation that because you yourself are a brand, that you have to control not just the sort of marketing of art, but also like the actual response to art itself. Whereas back in the day, I think people had a universal recognition that, well, at least by the 70s, people realized with the death of the artist that you don't have control once you release a work into the world. You really don't have a control, not just to the way it's taken in or the way it's consumed or the way it's remixed, but also the way that people respond to it. And I feel that a huge part of this sort of like fake instrumentalized culture war is because people have this impression nowadays, for some stupid reason, that you have a control over how people respond to your work as an artist. And I don't know, I feel that, and that extends to copyright, but also extends to the more intangible, like culture camp sort of stuff. That's the big problem. I think when people get a response that is negative or unintentional, it seems nowadays people like younger artists have this expectation that, oh my God, how dare you? It's like this girl that we were responding to on Twitter, this artist, and she was like, I can't believe it. These people are critiquing it. It's like, well, what are you going to do? Right. Like and I feel it's the same way with copyright, is that once you release a work into the world, there's always that expectation that people are going to take it up in different ways. And you really don't have control over that, so.
Well, we have a comment.
I want to talk about that though, because you've just hit on like a really central thing. So me being a couple decades older than y'all, as my
look like it.
As my generation,
boomer posting
is I'm not a boomer. I'm
that's like
no. We call boomers everybody. We call boomers everybody over like exactly. I'm a boomer.
You're a boomer. Oh my God, you're so old. So I'm actually in the middle of writing something about permission culture. Have you heard that phrase, permission culture?
Oh God.
Have you heard the phrase?
It sounds alienating, but yes, I think I've heard of the.
Right. So the thing with copyright. So when the web was new in the 90s, it was this glorious frontier of freedom. And it's not that now. Right? Like, and so another aspect of this is you know that my generation thinks your generation is extremely fragile, that it is full of people that constantly require external validation and demand it and experience narcissistic injury. One of the reasons for that is that my generation raised them and my generation sucks.
Well, that's the problem I feel with millennials, is that we were given both expectation and infantilization, which is a deadly mix of terrible neurosis, and hence why we have whole generations of young men and young women who they have parasocial relationships to various influencers, and so that make it out what you will.
So your generation grew up on the internet, and norms of the internet, it began as this really free thing, and there was immediately a battle between the copyright industries and the users of the internet, the free internet versus the copyright industries. And things got more and more enclosed, rules got more and more draconian. The internet, was supposed to root around censorship, but they built enough things on top of the internet, these walled gardens, that didn't matter. So what we have now does not feel like a free internet. The architecture underneath it, yes, is technically free, but social media has dominated internet discourse rather than free platforms.
Well, people blame normies a lot. Like people blame, they imagine, which I think is partially true, that originally there was a certain barrier to entry with the internet. Like you had to know something about computers, you had to know how to hook all this stuff up. But now, when everybody
you couldn't be a woman, that was a big important point.
You know what? It's worse now for women than it was when things were free. And the reason is that these social media, these walled garden social media sites, they kick off women all the time. And most people don't even know this, because the women that they're kicking off, you can't hear from them. It's like you don't even know they're being kicked off because they're being silenced.
Yeah, they're male presenting. No, I'm kidding. But I feel that that's a good point, because the early internet was this. We talk about, again, another topic we talk about a lot in the show, the early internet being a place of a million different islands, and you had to really work to find content, and people had an expectation that this was a place of true, not just, I wouldn't say freedom, but an exploration of what is outside of the norm. But as the corporations rolled in and discovered that life is being totally caught up by hyper reality. Then you have a situation nowadays where I think, what do they say, 90% of the surface web is controlled by like 5 different, like Google plus 4 other social media sites.
Well,
So
Google Plus is gone.
Yeah, no, but Google, I mean, yeah.
Oh, Google
got
plus other, right.
Yeah, well, Google is pretty much the internet to most people. Like it's Google,
Right.
Facebook,
right.
Google, Facebook, Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, Twitter. I don't know. Well, Twitter, we like to think that we're so important on Twitter, but really it's like TikTok and Instagram. But
Twitter,
no, yeah.
Twitter is a disaster. But anyway, I'm building up an argument here. So this battle went on. It was a cultural battle, and the copyright industries and its supporters made all these moral arguments for copyright and how like incredibly important it is. When I started freeing my work, people, remember one person said that I was a danger to artists.
Yeah, but ironically enough, these are the same record companies and content creators that don't really care about.
No, I know they don't care about
the artists themselves.
But anyway, these and this rhetoric was always used, that asking for permission is respect. And so I freed my work. I wonder where Lev went.
Yeah, Lev.
I'm here. I'm still here.
Okay.
So don't worry about it. I'm adjusting my camera. Everything's fine. Everything is completely fine.
He went to the shadow realm, and so now he's a disembodied.
Okay, now I can hear his voice. That's all.
The astral plane.
And by the way, Modern Hermeticist, yes, I will. You used my Shrek fedora painting. I'm going to sue your ass, and your hermetic temple will be mine. So don't worry about it. I'm coming for you. So go ahead, Nina.
Right. So all these arguments were made, and there was a cultural battle around copyright, like around the validity of copyright. And I was a demon. I mean, I was despised when I freed Sita Sings the Blues. People were furious. Anyway, so this whole your generation raised on that. What the hell?
No, keep going, Nina. Don't worry.
That's awesome.
This is a bit of a performance art right here.
Woo!
Next to Sneed.
He's taking my identity. He's identifying as me.
But but then Newgrounds came along, and then that was
I'm identifying as a disco inevitable. Ball. Anyway, so this whole generation was raised, was sort of manipulated in order to defend the idea of copyright and defend the idea of needing permission, right? Like a whole generation was trained to ask permission for everything, to believe that they did not have agency around culture, and that any sort of song or image or anything that they were exposed to and that they had internalized and that they were trying to interact with, the power to do that belonged to somebody else. So I describe that as like the contents of your own head. Once you've taken in a work, that's in your head, and your head belongs to you. But this entire generation believes that what is in their own head actually rightfully belongs to somebody else. That it rightfully belongs to copyright holders. And so they ask permission for everything, and they do not have the confidence or the sense of working with the culture that they've been raised in. So very much related to that is this response to identities, right? People want your perception of them. They want to control your perception of them, and they feel entitled to that. And like your perception of another person, that's in your head, right? Like
that doesn't belong to someone else.
Right. So Gio, like I perceive you as a man.
Right.
Regardless of how you identify.
And that's that.
Exactly. That picture of you is in my head, and you can identify as much as you want, and that's fine. It's like you're entitled to identify as an attack heli. I mean, I'm identifying as a disco ball. I do kind of. Like
you know what's funny? I remember someone wrote this essay about why they chose the attack helicopter meme is because it was some kind of like patriarchal, it's a violent act of like suppressing trans people, when really it was just a joke that came from 4chan. Like literally it was just like the first thing that popped into an Anon's head. But yeah, I get what you mean. It's true. This what I mean. I feel with the branding of art itself, you have to control the perception, and very few artists, and I talk about this on my podcast, like very few artists are able to do this. Like, and usually they're let's face it, they're terrible, like Banksy. So no, but like
my point is,
yeah.
It's the same thing, and it's happening in your generation because your generation was raised under an assault of permission culture propaganda, and so people actually believe that this is the right way of things, that controlling other people's perception of you is an entitlement, whereas anybody that's had any experience like trying to recover from a mental health problem, like me, right? Because I had like real severe depression when I was younger. What you learn when you're trying to manage your mental health is this idea of the locus of control has to be in yourself, and that you don't get to control what other people think of you. Other people are going to think whatever they want of you. And if your idea of yourself is bound up in that, that is a recipe for severe mental health problems. And depression is no fun. I mean, I've had plenty of it, but the way that you become strong enough to withstand that is to not control other people. That's all. That was my point.
But do you feel that like animation is different than music or the contemporary art world, or do you feel it's the same sort of like process?
Well, this also, by the way, quickly relates to a question which 360360 asked, and this is the second time he's asking, so I want to address it. Nina, is it okay with you if your work gets changed by remixing it, perhaps sold on t-shirts, etc., with no compensation back to you?
Yes.
Oh,
there we go.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing, so what I do is I, when people do that, I'm like, it would be nice if you sent me money. Like if you make money, I really appreciate getting some of that money, but I don't force anybody to do that. And I certainly am not going to invoke law to do that. Also, when you explore the reality of actually manufacturing things and making money, people have this idea that people are making money hand over fist by selling t-shirts, and it's like, no, they're not. It's expensive. Like it costs money to make stuff, and it takes a long time to actually turn a profit.
Yeah, well, yeah, it takes time, especially I would imagine with animation. Like that was the big thing about like YouTube basically murdering the animators, because it takes so much time to produce such, like maybe not even a 5-minute video, where it's like the algorithm determines that you need constant content, over 15 minutes. And for animators, unless you're doing like total shit, like that's impossible, like pretty much, right? So
yeah, but I don't know about killing animators. It's a different form. It's just a different thing, it's like saying, killing animators killed painters.
Yeah,
well, just in terms of the way,
the
way the algorithm works right now
was Newgrounds, right? And Newgrounds kind of got killed by YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean, the way that the algorithm of YouTube works right now, it does not really favor animators, because a lot of it is about more the attention.
But but someone brings up a good point.
It's every day, bro.
Yeah, but Nina, you do bring up a good point about like digital, like I hate to say it, but digital art did sort of like, it sort of knocked us painters down a peg. Ooh, I had a cat that looked almost like that. Wow. But yeah, digital art did knock us down a peg because it's very easy to produce. It's very easy to do something that's appealing, and but that's another issue for another time.
Speaking of appealing, look at this beautiful tiger right in front of us here.
She's a good kitty. Let's see if
what's her name?
This is Lola.
Lola. Yeah, the ASMR effects from the purring is quite something. I'm a big fan of that. And look at that. That is love. Adorable.
Pure love.
Yes.
So let's what were you going to say, Liv?
So I think that this could be a good opportunity to transfer this conversation into something that is brought up a lot on BTR, where the more, let's say, liberal idea of, let everybody do what they want, let your freak flag fly. I believe, Gio, the argument, or like the counter argument to that goes on quite regularly, is that once those floodgates open up, what we're seeing right now, not just with the copyright, but also with the SJWs and all that, that is the direct result of kind of like letting everybody do their own thing.
I feel like we should rather, before we get into that, we should use that as bridge into that with with Nina's work, particularly Cedar Masochism and
Yes.
what it's about and its mythology and its real struggle with tradition versus counter tradition. And I feel like, yeah, so maybe we'll do that. That'll be a good bridge instead of just, talking about the same stuff, all the culture war
Definitely.
stuff. So yeah.
So
So
go in it.
yeah, so describe what's the basic purpose and what would you say plot of Cedar Masochism, because it's basically describing, to me it's like describing the Passover story, but there's a lot of like, it's more of what you're not saying rather implying than just the basic sort of Judaic tradition. Because to me, is it a conversation between you and your grandfather, or
That was my father.
oh, your father? Okay, so yeah, so there's this conversation where you are the lamb, and your father is like the representative of the
the goat.
Yeah,
the goat
classic
specifically.
Semitic,
Very cute goat.
yeah, the goat, and your
Or
father
perhaps a black sheep.
yeah, that's probably it. And your father is representative of the classic Semitic conception of the Lord. And you're having this conversation, but this conversation really is just a foil, I think.
I wouldn't say Semitic, I would say Abrahamic.
Abrahamic, yeah. I couldn't, why did I forget that? But the conversation is really a foil for not just describing Passover, but also the basis of mythology that the Abrahamic faiths sort of overturned, and contemporary, and I guess this is where people read in like contemporary gender politics, which you have argued against. But basically I'm describing too much. It's your project, it's your work. So
yeah, but the thing is, like, I don't actually like telling people what it's supposed to mean, because it's a lot more interesting to me, right? Like, I made the movie. What's the point of me saying what the movie's about? I made the movie.
Right,
I'm more interested in hearing you say what the movie's about.
Yeah, I like the part, like, we'll get but just really quickly, there's a stark like transition halfway through, that depending on who you are, it's sort of like the representative of like the earth goddess, the longhouse, the longhouse mother, being totally toppled and smashed by true Abrahamic patriarchal God, based in red pilled. But then you sort of you use this as like, and I know back in the day this was like a popular sort of train of thought, using this as, so now the dominator ego comes in, and it's like the male centric, logocentric sort of deification of the Lord. And then it's like you can have this one shot where you're like comparing the KKK next to Islamic fundamentalists, next to the Israeli Defense Force glassing Palestinians with fighter jets. So it's like,
well, that scene was after Things We Do for Love, because when I was making,
that's right, yeah,
that's the song. When I was making it, so like I have this whole story, and I'm like very critical, but it all ends up with, and they make a new church, right? They make this religion. It's the beginning, after the Exodus, they build the tabernacle, and there you go. And I was just like, what the fuck, right? Because I was reading the Old Testament finally, and thinking about it for years to make this, and I was just like, what the fuck? Like, this is it? Like, this is the happy ending? I guess so. And I chose the song, The Things We Do for Love, because in all of the, like, in my whole journey of researching this and learning about it, one of the reasons that I made this was my father died. And I was thinking about, his upbringing in a religious family and religion in general, and the heritage, and and the Old Testament, like, all of this, and got into arguments with people and lots of conversations. But what I just concluded was, this doesn't actually make sense, but people love it, right? Like, nobody can explain to me, nobody can justify really anything about these religions, but it's their family, it's what they were raised with, and they love it. And like the thing with circumcision, right? Like I had the cartoon circumcision in the same,
Oh God, yeah.
right? Things we do for love. And it's like, this is horrific, right? Like this is, it's horrific and it's beloved and Jews keep doing it. It's, you know, like a profound ritual, I guess. And I'm just like, okay, I don't get it, but I can tell people love it. So that's what that piece was about. It was like, and I can't tell people not to love what they love, you know? I can't tell, you're raised in it and it's like your family, or maybe even you have a conversion experience and it's just some really profound connection. So at the end of that, showing these, you know, what we consider atrocities, these things were done out of love too. You know, like the zealots that flew a plane into the World Trade Center, they were doing that out of profound passion and commitment. And the KKK also, I mean, from their point of view, it's profound passion and commitment and principles as far as they're concerned. So I'm not saying like, I'm trying to step back from what's right and what's wrong and just go like, this is how humans are. I mean, they love ideologies, they love religions, we are religious, and we do all kinds of things in the name of love, including things that at this point we would judge really harshly. There are instructions, you know, if you respect the Bible, respect the Old Testament, there are commandments against idolatry, and we are all idolaters. And this thing with smashing idols, I think I put that one in Your Time Is Gonna Come.
Yeah, that was the one, yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, like, Westerners are like, oh my gosh, you know, that's so horrible, they're destroying idols. It's like, you're supposed to do that. They're more committed. The people that are smashing these idols are more committed to this religion that you claim to respect and be part of. They're actually following the law in that, you know, in that religion, and you're not. I don't think it's good. I mean, I'm very much against destroying beautiful ancient works of art, but I was hoping people would actually think about this. Ha ha ha.
Well,
like,
let's open this up to Chad Kaczynski and to Remus. Like, what do you guys think? I don't know if you saw the film.
Yeah, I watched it. I thought it was really sweet because it's a conversation between a daughter and her father, and talking about something that he clearly finds uncomfortable but is willing to talk to her about. I love the movie because it's about really profound things done in a very like anybody can understand it. You know what I mean? It's not hidden what you're saying. You do a great job of a mix between subtlety and a lack of it sometimes. Like sometimes you just drop it. There's a scene in the middle of that movie where I was just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, this is fucking real, you know? I enjoyed watching it because it's talking about this from the perspective of the people that it's quote unquote about, you know? And you know what he remembers from his childhood and all of that, right? It's a connection to the past. It was very moving, I would say.
thank you.
Yeah, no, I quite enjoyed it.
Oh, and just to clarify, I don't know. Listen about the chat. Listen, we don't moderate the chat, as we made it clear, but no gamer words. It's not because of us, because of YouTube. Okay, so don't worry about
this. This is coming pretty much from D Live. So
yeah. No wonder it's coming from D Live.
Yes. So Nina, just so you know what exactly D Live is about. So D Live has a lot of really young people, like Zoomers, like the base Gen Z, as they are called.
Generation Zyklon, you mean?
Yes, exactly. They are really young, and they like to act out. So
we Gentiles too love circumcision. I love that.
No, but Nina, you're cool because it's bound to come up. But you're cool, like not cool, but like you realize that like you're probably gonna come across some comments about the certain tribe that you're a part of. So you're just to be clear, don't worry about it. It's totally fine. It's all humor. It's all jokes. So if you ever see something in the chat about you being a part of this certain tribe, don't worry, don't freak out.
Okay, I'm not following the chat because I don't have that split attention.
Oh, thank you.
I'm actually attending to our conversation. If I were to read that at the same time, I would not be able to process
too much
what you're saying.
information.
Yeah, don't worry about it. But anyway, so yeah. So let's hear. I'm curious to hear Chad Kaczynski's take on this. Not just about the film, but about the role of Abrahamic religions coming from your, I'm assuming, pagan perspective. Go ahead, my friend.
Well, Jews are funny.
We are.
Right off the bat. Oh boy.
Lev is my friend, and out of respect for him and the well-being of his podcast, I will refrain from making comments on the historicity of the Passover narrative.
No, but maybe no. I want.
Have you seen the movie? I don't think there's like much of historicity there.
Go without using too many expletives. I'm curious to hear your alternative like. Oh my God, D-Live comments. I'm curious to hear, Chad, your critique in the most not sanitized. Give us the truth in your perspective. But yeah, go ahead, my friend. Go ahead. I'm curious to hear this alternative narrative of Passover.
Well, I enjoyed Remus's comment. Above all else, I did think it was a very cute, wholesome story. Lev had originally sent me a link to the film and to the interview that Nina did with Professor Canadian Frogman. And I thought that gave a good context that made the father-daughter story that's contained within it very heartwarming. And anti-Semitic or not, it's a beautiful story about family and passing traditions down, which is something I strongly believe in regardless of your background. If you wanted me to give my spicier take on the historicity of Passover, it's the original 6 million claim. We have no evidence to suggest that there was any enslavement of Hebrews in Egypt. It's far more likely that they were privately contracted, paid, and housed laborers. However, I won't go into any more detail about that because I know that the moderators of these lovely websites hosting our podcast would not be too pleased.
Well, I should just add that like there is no historical evidence of the Passover story. It's not real. It's not I mean, it's a myth.
It's an
and
important
myths are
myth.
powerful.
Yeah.
But it's not a historic. I mean, even my father, I think I even asked him at one point in the movie, which I loved his response too. Like, do you think the events of the Passover?
Oh yeah, he's like, well, what kind of question is that?
Yeah, I said, what the hell kind of question is that? I don't care.
That was the greatest part that was my favorite part in the whole movie. It was excellent.
Yeah, but I feel
it was a perfect answer.
But I feel without getting too spicy that, I mean, would you say that's largely the response of the Jewish diaspora, and because I don't know, from my Catholic perspective, we're very much invested in the historicity of Christ. Obviously,
yeah,
it's a different sort of reality than what I'm noticing from. I don't know, maybe it's different with Israelis, but with the Jewish diaspora, do you feel like that, both of you, Nina and Chad, do you feel that maybe they don't have that, not that they don't have much of a tie to tradition, but when it comes to the brute like facts and metaphysics of the Old Testament, the Talmud, do you feel that that's sort of like over the generations, that's almost like, not the point, or I don't know. I'm curious as an outsider, as a
Well,
as a Gentile, that, you know what I mean? Like, I'm curious to know, like, what the current Jewish attitude is towards this.
All right. So first of all, I am no representative of Jews.
Obviously, you've made that very clear in your film.
Yeah, I made that very clear in the film. And the film is really not Zionist, but I really say that by that last scene, "This land is mine." I mean,
I didn't know that was a part of a larger film for the
Yeah, I
years,
saw that years
actually.
ago. I saw that years ago.
Yeah.
An Egyptian friend of mine sent it to me.
That's the first piece of the film that I made. But it was, the first shall be last and all that. So that song came from the movie Exodus.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I had never seen actually until I started doing research for this movie. And it was, this was a Zionist anthem, and the movie was a Zionist. I mean, it was largely a piece of Zionist propaganda. It also had,
which is funny, because a lot of those films, like the 10 Commandments and Exodus, those like long, like 4-hour epics, it was really like instrumental in converting American evangelicals towards what they call Christian Zionism.
Christian Zionism, right?
Which I think is quite interesting.
Right.
I'll say no more. I'll say no more. But
very widespread. Yeah. Say no more.
Yeah, I didn't know about the 10 Commandments being part of that, but this definitely was. And the song and the whole movie, what it's doing is it's tying the modern Exodus of World War, post World War II, with this biblical story, which makes it, much more emotional and much more profound. There is no historical evidence for the biblical Exodus. There is, and I realize this is really, since we have an official, I guess, anti-Semite. a proud anti-Semite on the show.
Counter-Semite.
That's right. A proud counter-Semite on the show.
They're not all bad. Don't.
So he may dispute the historicity of World War II and the final solution and that.
Anti-Zionism, I think, is a valid position to explore, but that's
sure, anti-Zionist.
I feel and you yourself, I think you dabble with the anti-Zionist.
I just want to say one thing real quick, which is I think that when it comes to people not having the ability to talk about this stuff, it fuels suspicion on all sides, and as a result, nothing can be taken as something that's valid, to the point that people would completely deny even if people would deny certain things have happened, at the least there is enough evidence of enough video footage just to say that people did not have, they weren't in Disneyland. People did not have a good time. People did not.
They debate the numbers, and they debate. I feel like I'm even just going crazy, like even just touching this shit. I feel like we're gonna.
It feels radioactive, but at the same time, like, there were horrific things happening all over Europe to lots of different people, including Jews.
Yes, and I will say that. All right, so what I do want to say is, for me, I have no doubt of the historicity of the Holocaust, right? Like, so if someone is denying the Holocaust, I'm just going to be like, well, we're just going to have to not go there because I can't really get into that. Just except that, as far as I am concerned, it happened. I do not think that. I mean, there were a number of Jewish critics of Zionism at the time, Hannah Arendt being one of them.
Yes, that's
there
right.
have been a number of Jewish critics of Zionism throughout. I think Noam Chomsky. Quite a few, actually. Like a lot of Jewish intellectuals that I really, really respect were like, this is not going to go well at all.
Who is the one that wrote The Holocaust Industry? Howard Zinn, or no, Franken. He wrote the Holocaust Industry book.
Yeah. Anyway, there have been some really thoughtful.
Norm Finkelstein.
Norm Finkelstein, yeah.
Yeah, there have been thoughtful Jewish critics of Zionism, and yeah, I mean, I am critical of Zionism. The thing with like, if you filter yourself down to some identity around Zionism, people will just it's hopeless, right? Like it's a complicated mess. I acknowledge that people have been born in the state of Israel for quite a few generations that had nothing to do with the foundation of Israel. It's like this has happened, right? Like it's too late. It
already happened.
Yes, it's already happened. It exists. Like Israel is there, and
well, the real culprits were the British, the Anglos. That was the real problem.
Oh, I don't know about that, man. I think it
well,
was
the other
the
question
Anglos
was,
in tandem with
they were the vehicle. They were the
vehicle, maybe.
But the other question comes to where would people prefer to live, as far as not just the Jewish people, but the Arabians and the Druze and others, when it comes to Israel versus Palestine. For example, in Israel, the second national language is Arabic. Same with the representation that they have in the government there. So it's like I don't see the Arabians who are living in Israel wanting to get out of Israel anytime soon. They kind of like where they're living right now.
There's been abuses, Lev. There has been like
relative
worker force.
But relative to what, again? Like, if you were to compare that with the abuses that Jews would get who were living in Islamic countries, like I remember,
wouldn't even be close. It wouldn't.
Yeah,
be close.
like when God Saad was talking about his experience living in. Yeah, well, before even being killed, like if we're talking about like God Saad, like he and Jordan Peterson have appeared on the same shows multiple times. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Nina, but he was from what was it, Lebanon.
He's Lebanese.
He's Lebanese.
He's Lebanese. He lives in Montreal now.
And he's talking about how throughout the years,
there's quite a bit of Lebanese in Montreal. Actually.
Yeah, because they were running.
And they are also.
I lived across the street from a Palestinian Christian. They
that's
a lot
of Alawites went there as well. So,
yeah. Canada was full of refugees, so like you just got horror stories from everybody's families. It was insane. Everybody's pasts were full of craziness.
There was a lot of Vietnamese boat people. My local church took a lot of them in the 70s. Yeah, but anyways, Lev. Yeah, I feel like I don't know. I don't want to. Maybe we should move on to
when technology.
But go ahead.
What the movie's about ultimately.
Yeah,
It's about this cycle of conflict.
It's a mess, and I don't see any solution. And I have been asked at screenings. Somebody said, "Well, surely you take a side. I mean, whose side do you take?" And I said, "The land's." I take the side of because that's the thing with like. The whole movie is about like, well, what did we have prior to Abrahamism? That looked pretty good.
I always love the very end, like that cheeky face Death makes, where he's like, "This land is," meaning like death, like the angel of death.
Yeah,
that's who owns.
Yeah,
that land, and I really love that scene.
God owns.
We have a comment from Philip Daniel. Ask Nina if she knows Arnold Schoenberg's unfinished opera Moses Unto Aaron, which has been adapted into a film by Straub and Hewlett. Schoenberg could never reconcile. I'm quite a fan of Schoenberg. I like that type of atonal stuff. So, but have you ever heard of Moses Unto Aaron?
Moses Unto Aaron? No.
Oh,
but I'm a Philistine, so I know culture.
So yeah,
has Lev could answer that.
No, unfortunately, I am also a Philistine. I have not heard of Moses Unto Aaron. But what is Moses Unto Aaron?
We'll get a we'll get a reply.
Lev is probably. I mean,
opera,
so Lev, from the film, it should be clear that my father was, in spite of the family heritage, my father mostly practiced atheism or didn't practice anything. Right. My father was actually he was an atheist as well as a Jew, and he was concerned about our heritage and stuff. But
an atheist Jew?
I was never bat mitzvahed. Like I didn't have to go through that. Did you go through that? Like, are you bar mitzvahed?
I am not bar mitzvahed, and I would say also, Nina, that I have not gone through a lot of the other aforementioned things that Jewish people have. So Yeah, I mean that
Thank
is.
God.
I would say I'm kind of an exception when it comes to a lot of these different things, but at the same time, I think that there is a lot of value in looking into Judaism as far as the mystical side of it, how exactly all of these things kept being brought up. And by the way, I am gonna fix the chat right now. I'm on the laptop, so it's kind of difficult for me to use these two things at
Well,
the
it's
same
because
time.
we have a delay in case there's gamer words. So.
Well, we don't have a delay. Okay, something happened in D Live. I'm gonna figure out what exactly is going on with D Live, because look, here's the thing: the people on D Live, they do not know that gamer words are going to create a problem with the YouTube algorithm, nor do they care. So I think I'm actually going to, yes, I am going to.
I love how it's such a quintessential D Live. Oh man, that's beautiful.
Yes.
But anyways, it causes us
a
problems.
quintessential part of the internet, but now
It should be.
It is.
Now it is.
Yeah.
Now it has simply been relegated to D lives and things like that.
But go ahead, Lev. Yeah.
So when it comes to things like the Kabbalah, for instance, I love talking about how Kabbalah, Hermeticism, a lot of these different things, they are very much related and talk about something primal that has to do with the human body and the spirit, and how, like I was talking to Nina earlier, like we do these breathing techniques that cause us to experience, moments of connecting with something higher than us. And this whole idea of the tree of life, the 7 chakras, that I think can be linked up together with the Sumerian tree of life, like that whole bush that the 2 birdmen are around, and that can also be linked up to the Kabbalistic tree of life with the 7 chakras, showing like the human body is also a microcosm of the universe. And I don't want to go full like flower child over here, but actually, speaking of all this stuff, Hotep Sophia has just entered the chat as well. Hotep Sophia, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is a great pleasure to see you again. And Hotep Sophia is a really, really big fan of Nina Paley. You've been watching her for a long time, right?
Yeah, I am actually. I feel like I discovered the shorts out of nowhere. I've seen sadomasochism like 100 times. It's like a once a month, like I have to just remember that these people are crazy, and it keeps me grounded.
Cool, thanks.
And when it comes to, for example, the Longhouse Mother, this is something that Gio mentioned, and I want to go back to that because I think this talks about the source of a lot of the. So, for example, there are people. Yeah, like there are people in Kaliak, like I was talking about before, who were talking about, and they even made music videos where, like, the goddesses that you had, like the dancing fertility goddesses, they had those goddesses with all of these, like, how do I say it? All these low T men around them, worshiping them, kind of like
low T men.
Yes, like these low T men.
I love how much she loves it. That's hilarious.
Well, the concept came.
It's beautiful, right? Perfect.
Yeah. There's a long history of the concept. Like, for example, if you look at like Jungians, like Eric Neumann, but the concept of like the actual term, the meme term of Longhouse Mother came from Bronze Age Pervert, talking in his book Bronze Age Mindset, talking about how these fertility cults in antiquity, the ones that you're taking in the film iconography from. So, for example, you have the Venus of Waldorf. That's like the classic one.
Yes.
You have Isis, which is reaching her star body across the sky. But at the one point you have...
That was Nut, actually.
Nut. Yeah. And then at one point you have the archetype of the dancing fertility goddess mother with her breasts, and there's all these women with they're sort of cutouts that bleed into each other, and animals are going through her body.
Yeah.
There's this one point where she gives birth through the cosmic yoni to the male figure, and the male figure ultimately destroys her and takes on her skin and ushers in based, red-pilled, patriarchal, Faustian future. So you have that conflict of... And so Bronze Age Pervert, he says about how the Longhouse Mother, where the matriarch is in the classic longhouse, sort of stifling the creativity and energy of the younger males by literally sitting on them in various depictions of mythology. And so you needed to destroy the Longhouse Mother in order to not, I mean, from your perspective, this was a terrible loss and it ushered in a history of sexualized violence, which, I mean, no doubt, possibly, but it also created this sort of Faustian bargain where now the patriarchal, the lunar, what Evola calls the lunar masculine aspect, can now come in and create a glorious civilization that speeds up innovation and Faustian man exploring. I don't know. Well, Remus and Chad Kaczynski, you two have a lot of thoughts on these, so I feel like I'm just talking. What do you guys feel about destroying the Longhouse Mother?
But I really want to hear this, but I have to take a bathroom break. Can I come back in a sec?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, I'm just going to stop the video and mute myself, and I'll be right back.
So I'm going to take this chance to tell everybody to subscribe. By the way, we were only having like 3 people on D Live watching this thing versus all the people who are watching it on YouTube right now.
Well, we have to grow on D Live.
We do have to. Yes, we do have to grow on D Live, but also we got to figure out a way for the D Live people to fucking behave themselves when it comes
to... That's never going to happen.
That's never going to happen.
Oh, is that the problem? The D Live people?
Well, the problem is the D Live chat because they're not going to control themselves.
I feel I don't want to alienate the D Live people, but I do feel that the D Live obviously has a more loose moderation than YouTube. YouTube, unfortunately, but they're the Jannies on YouTube are just ridiculous. So, but hopefully we can grow on D Live. And by the way, we recently got approved thanks to Lev on Apple Podcast.
Yes, we have.
Now you can. Now we're real. Now we're a real podcast.
The corpse of Steve Jobs has acknowledged us.
Exactly. And it's so easy. You just go to Apple Podcasts and you type in "break the rules," and it's like one of the first ones there. We're gonna beat that lady who has her break the rules before us. But anyway, so what were you saying? Who was that just now?
That was Chad.
That was me.
Chad, yes.
Lev, yeah, while Nina was out, I saw something in chat that I wanted to clear up. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to turn my camera off. I need to make myself dox proof.
Uh-oh.
Oh, God.
Oh, boy. What's going to happen?
Let's
see.
Have y'all talked about any of the copyright issues yet?
Yes.
Yeah, we already talked about copyright.
Well, Hotep will give you a little bit of a chance.
Oh yeah, she'll talk about it with you.
Yeah. Hotep usually talks about things where we like it.
Wow, look at that.
I try not to. Oh yes.
Now you're like one of the Daft Punk people.
You're subtly doxing your environment, but that's okay.
This is my anti-dox astronaut helmet. Someone in chat asked if the story about me getting my throat slit is true. I wanted to
Whoa!
Oh my gosh!
Holy crap!
Share these.
Beyond legendary.
This top one here, it's quite jagged, and the reason for that is because the blade went 4.5 inches deep. Now,
wow.
Jesus.
I challenge you. This lower one here, the small one, that was the last cut. It was a direct knife incision that they then pulled out. That was 4.5 inches deep as well. Now, for the person who was wondering if the story is real, and I know some people made allegations that it was a failed suicide attempt, I challenge you to find any motherfucker who can slit their throat 3 goddamn times and keep going.
Yeah, that's wow.
That's
crazy. I mean, how did they not did they get the jugular, or because you had to walk quite a bit to go to find, I think you found someone who was driving by, if I recall, but what you went through in the desert, that was just, oh my God, that's something, that's next level. But what happened? They didn't manage to nick the jugular, or else you would have.
No, they didn't hit the jugular. It was a lot deeper than it was wide.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
They didn't cut across. They just punctured.
I mean, it's not like it's
more so that they
not
punctured than they cut across.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that they didn't. cut across.
Did they
That's
catch
already
any of the
minimized, yeah.
Did they catch any of the guys who did it?
No. Well, I don't know exactly. Supposedly the native law enforcement have someone in custody. I'm going to talk about this in detail next week on the Third Grail, and I strongly recommend that people check that out. However, while Nina was away, I just wanted to take a moment to answer that comment.
All right.
Excellent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Seats.
Well, Nina, now you know. This is
You
for
cannot
real.
I do.
punk
Yeah, I had even
Chad
asked. I'm the one
Kaczynski.
that asked that.
Yeah.
So back to the Longhouse mother and all of that.
Mother.
Yes. So I'm curious what your takes are on the things that Gio was mentioning with this. And I would also add one more thing, which is some of the tribes like the Scythians, some of our friends there on Twitter, they attribute those tribes as being more of an example of equality, where you would have men and women wearing those pointy hats, riding along each other, with the horses. And they treated each other pretty much like we equals when it came to, proving one's worth on the battlefield regardless of gender. And they would say, like, they were the true people who were equal, not like all these fetishistic fertility cult farmers, who put women as like this fetish object with these big hips and breasts and all that. So that's an
They
interesting...
weren't farmers, Liv. Has anybody read this book called Against the Grain? About the advent, like the first states.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard of it.
The earliest states. So the whole thing with farming, farming is states. Like once you have people farming, you have states forming. And this parallels actually the mythology of the goddess and the giving birth to the god. Those early gods, they're like vegetation gods. And the more farming, the more agriculture you have, the more the male deity rises and the more the female falls. And we don't have a lot of record of pre-agricultural societies because they didn't have writing. Because writing is something that you have when you have a state, when you have property. It begins with keeping accounts of property. So there's really no way to know. And something that I thought while I was working on this aspect of sadomasochism is we have no idea how people practice. We have no idea really what their conception of the divine was. We like to make stories. We like to conjecture based on these little images that we find, but we don't know. It seems really likely that the earliest human conception of the divine was of female. It makes sense, right? Because that's where more people come from, is out of the female body. We don't know. And we just don't know any of this. It's pure conjecture.
Pure conjecture. It's pure conjecture, yeah.
Well, Kyle mentioned in the chat the works of James C. Scott, if you've read Seeing Like a State. It's funny you mentioned Scott. I'm quite a fan of his work because there's one part in the film where the male deity takes prominence and Moses smashes the idols. And now the little male figures that come out of the yoni, they form an agricultural segmented line. They all create the same square space. And to me, it almost represents the birth of like modern instrumental reason and quantifying nature and ultimately conquering nature, that James C. Scott in his book talks about how the Enlightenment bred, and even before the Enlightenment within mythology, there was this need to grid and to use measure and numbers to basically dominate nature in such a way that agriculture and then eventually industrial advanced society can prop up. So I felt that was like a really nice Easter egg within Cedar Masochism. Also, why did you pick the title Cedar Masochism? Like, I know it's a play on
Seder
masochism.
Seder, not cedar. Seder.
Sorry, Seder masochism.
Cedar would be if the cedar trees, as we're represented by the goddesses, would decide, you know what, we want to be cut. Although there is an interesting thing about that with, so there was a story that I heard again, people who live more out in nature talking about that the vibe that they're getting from Mother Nature is almost one that's saying, you know what? I challenge you to try to build a civilization. I'm going to be hard. I'm going to be wild. And it's about finding a balance between being able to subjugate nature to such an extent that you would be able to survive without completely destroying nature. In that sense, trying to find a middle ground between having a functional society and, not just becoming this strange autistic, like I don't really know the word for it, but just micromanaging every single aspect and reducing people in numbers, which is, I think, the fear that a lot of people today who want to return back to nature have. Like, in fact, the name Ted Kaczynski, Chad Kaczynski borrowed his name from that guy, and that was a really big fear of his. Like, you're familiar with the Unabomber, right, Nina?
Yes. In fact, I was wondering. I was like, "Oh, are you Ted's cousin?"
Hopefully, maybe.
Like, yes.
No, I'm actually his secret child.
Oh.
Powerful.
Oh.
So this reminds me, it's funny, earlier today I was telling someone else about my Gaia theory of reproduction. Because what you're talking about, it's like, yeah, I'm also, fascinated with the stars, and science fiction is amazing, and I love literature and culture, and I have like a love-hate relationship with my species. I am a species trader. I'm not reproducing.
You're reproducing through your art, though. That
correct.
I think is the key thing.
Correct, but I'm not biologically reproducing, and I'm a long-term volunteer for the voluntary human extinction movement, which, if you haven't heard of that, that's a whole thing.
Is that related to Church of Euthanasia?
Not really, from the same era, but the voluntary human extinction movement is a kinder, gentler, and more accessible, I think, concept. Yeah. Church of Euthanasia is sort of in-your-face punk dada, which is...
You remember that I Like to Watch music video? I saw that right
after... Oh my God, so you're actually familiar with them. Did you know I was on the Jerry Springer show with the Church of Euthanasia in 1997?
Wait, was that when you were in the dominatrix outfit?
Yes.
Oh,
okay,
I'm gonna,
if you don't mind, Nina, I'm gonna post that photo on Discord with the dominatrix.
Okay, you can post a link to the video. It's really something.
Okay.
That was some Dada performance art, for sure, but definitely hard to understand. And it did sort of model things, but I feel like the voluntary human extinction movement states things very well, very compassionately, and I'm down with that. But anyway, the love-hate relationship with my own species. And so the Gaia theory of reproduction is that if we look at the Gaia theory, you're familiar with the Gaia theory, right? That the entire Earth is one organism, right? Which
yes.
Represent as the goddess, right?
Yeah,
sure.
So a fundamental aspect of living organisms, for something to be a living organism, is it must reproduce. So how does Gaia reproduce, right? If Gaia is one thing, how is it going to make a copy of itself? And my theory is that human beings, as much as we trash nature and seem to be at odds with nature, we nonetheless evolved. We are part of the earth. And that we are essentially sperm cells who are hell-bent. We have built into us this passionate desire to colonize other planets just for its own sake. It's very romantic for us, and it's thrilling, and we're willing to put tons of resources into it in spite of all the hardships. And our function is not, even though we believe that we're going to live on other planets, our actual function is to spread microbes to other planets, because if humans reach other planets, we are these convenient meat bags full of microbes, and we're not going to survive, but our bodies will feed all of these microbes and give them a head start to continue life elsewhere, and give it a couple billion years, and then there will be life on these other planets.
A transformation.
Another biosphere, in other words. There'll be, if we look at the biosphere as the single living organism, and also many organisms die in
Panspermia
reproduction.
you're talking about, right?
Sorry, what?
Talking about panspermia, like the idea that the planet seeds life on another planet through potentially.
Right. So like we think that it's us. We think that we're going to continue human civilization on other planets, but actually we are being used by nature to spread bacteria to other planets because we're not going to survive.
They do the real work.
Yeah,
they do the heavy lifting. They're like billions of permutations per month, per year. Imagine, like they're doing so much. You know, I mean, like of the they're like the AI compiler of information of biology. You know what I mean? Like the thing you put the bulk numbers into. That's what the bacteria is doing.
Right, and I mean, or even more primitive microbes theoretically.
Yeah, exactly.
But in this way, from that another biosphere could develop, and that would be reproduction. And as I was saying, a lot of creatures actually die in the process of reproduction, or they become extremely weak. So what people always say is like, oh well, we have to go to other planets because this planet's not going to last, right? Because we're trashing it, so we have to go to another planet. And it's like that's part of the reproductive process, right? Hopefully it won't happen. But if I have, we can't choose like one side, right? Like we're humans, and so we have both of these archetypes in us, right? We have the smothering mother, and we have the innovative explorer. What are called
Promethean?
The Promethean. Thank you. That's perfect. But if I had to pick a side, or what I was doing was picking a side in sadomasochism, because I feel like the Great Mother is underground right now, and we're out of balance.
I don't know. It's
definitely bubbling up for sure.
But Chad, you had something to say?
Well, I want to hear Hotep Sophia. What were you going to say?
Oh, okay, and Hotep Sophia.
Well, I mean, that's sort of like the grand revelation is that the mother is just as important as the father. I mean, from a Christian perspective, that's sort of like why I like sadomasochism, because it allows the female to have a role in the actual story of the Bible. Whereas when you read it, you're like, okay, like what did the woman do? Like, but you know that there has to be a mother somewhere. So I was able to connect with that part where you actually get to see how the woman was there and literally like cast away to tell the story in a way that limits the woman. So I think that with stories like that, there's lots of revelations that are just, I mean, I'm a millennial, and millennials are notoriously nuts, but there's lots of like awakening to the importance of the female in a situation. I mean, there's still lots of millennials are nuts. I mean, I don't know what to say. These people, I don't understand them, but people are starting to wake up and say, okay, you can't really have a polite society without a well-functioning woman. Can't just be about like the men, being functioning, well, and the women just have to sit back. That's sort of like old wave feminism, because this new feminism is something different. But I think people are waking up to the fact that this is something that we need to be thinking about at least.
Yeah, but what I mean about underground is like in the whole Bible, right? Like they're underground in Abrahamism.
Yeah, for sure. They don't have a voice, but they're there.
Right, and I mean, like women have, of course, you can't have humanity without women, right? Like even if you have the most patriarchal society in the world, they need women to do the reproductive labor, or else you don't have any more humans.
Everybody's got a mother.
Right, everybody's got a mother who's female.
But they limit that. I mean, they've limited how the importance of that, and I think that's sort of a feminism byproduct is saying, like I was talking to Lev about this, a lot of women in my age group, I'm 35, and so I know a lot of people who don't have any kids yet, and they're like, oh, maybe I have to wait until I have this perfect job and this perfect life and this perfect stuff before I have kids. And then what happens is you get to be close to 40 and you haven't had any kids yet. Meanwhile, you have people in urban areas, they're starting to have kids at 16 and 17. So you have this huge problem where you have, you know, the well-educated people who are waiting so long that they're not able to pass along that wisdom that they've collected against a group of people who are not necessarily as educated, but they started having babies super early. So the population is like, it's like a huge separation, because you have the educated people are getting smaller and smaller, that class. Then you have the lower class getting bigger and bigger. And there's no way to really, there's very few people who can actually bridge that whole divide. It just turns into like a giant mess.
Well, that's what the movie Idiocracy was about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I, you know, my whole thing is
Eugenic breeding.
yeah. I mean, it is. It's like, it's funny because eugenics. Everyone's like, no, eugenics is terrible, and yet everybody's a eugenicist, right? Like they're not going to call it eugenics, but everyone I've ever talked to, including
Oh God!
what?
She's right. She's fucking right.
That's
Come
true.
on.
No, it's true.
Everyone
No,
actually
but I'm
goes,
just,
I don't want to have sex with that
I'm
person
just-
because they repulse me.
no, it's true. No. I'm just looking at the meta, like the discussion itself. It's like,
It's true.
I think at this
so
point, Nina doesn't care about being canceled any further.
Yeah,
I've been
That's why I said
I've been
basic.
canceled so much, and that for the stupidest reasons, right? Like you're all worried about, like, oh, these hot button things, like we're talking about, you know, Israel and Zionism and eugenics, and it's like, no one cares. You don't get canceled for that. You get canceled for saying the name Ellen Page.
Oh,
That's why you get canceled.
Ooh.
how dare you name that?
Oh my God.
person who never existed.
It's so stupid. It's like
Yo,
there
when I
are
woke
actually
up that day,
The
and I saw
best
that on my
part-
phone, I was like, why did I see? Why?
The best
Why
part
are you
is
trying to
that
do that?
because of this, Vaush is saying that we won the culture war, but really it's like every single media company and corporation and tech company has to like basically censor you out of existence if you question the narrative. So you're really winning, Vaush. The left is really winning the culture war. Yeah. So, but that's
But
all
be-
just stupid
but
bullshit.
before-
So don't worry about it.
But before we tie this to what I was mentioning before, as far as whether liberalism itself may have something to do with it, and I'm undecided when it comes to this. But before we get to that, can you tell us a little bit, Nina, about your experience in your hometown with like the festivals and everything since this whole? I know I don't mean to go down this road,
no,
but for
it's
those who are
okay.
not
You can
aware,
read about it. This has been like when I made Sita Sings the Blues, the defining trauma of my adult life at that point had been this breakup with my husband. And the defining trauma since then has been this insane canceling thing. Where, you know, I've been banned in my hometown. I mean, it's actually a lot easier for me since the pandemic came around, because you know, these mobs can't like form among themselves, and also I feel no pressure to go and perform. There's no public for me to go into that I'd be banned from, right? But I'm the only filmmaker ever to be banned from the Art Theater in Champaign, Illinois. It since went under.
Why did you get banned?
Oh, because according to them, I'm a transphobic bigot who's in danger
Oh,
of trans people.
Oh boy.
Which is-
I'm so
which is-
foolish. That's the-
Really ironic, because I've had a couple trans lovers, and you know, like whenever I say like
Oh
genuinely, like
God.
I'm not kidding.
I'm sorry, Nina, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but can I please just say, you are so delightfully Jewish. You are so wonderfully, beautifully Jewish. Yeah, and I mean that in the most sincere and heartfelt way.
So you're a philo-Semite.
Oh
I am a
people that-
counter-Semite. I maintain that.
You're a philo-counter-Semite.
See, counter in that I counter myself to organized political Jewry, but I mean I
never
did.
invited me to
But
any
no, but
clothes.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. When you're talking about Jews being connected with this, my whole thing is look back at, and I don't mean to go a whole. I feel like every single stream is
Guys,
the same thing.
well,
But anyway,
Lev,
hold on,
wait,
real
wait,
quick.
Lev,
French Revolution.
Please, Chad
French
has been waiting
Revolution.
patiently, and I feel
French
that
Revolution. No Jews. French Revolution.
no,
same,
actually,
same
Lev,
thing.
there was
Actually. Okay. Again, my whole point here is that I don't like.
Few of them.
Okay, my whole point is that I don't like this thing where leftism, the rabid leftism that has gone on, which has, done horrible things as far as, even publications saying, oh, it's so good that white people are going to be extinct now, yada, yada, yada. I hate the fact that the Jews who have zero to do with any of this bullshit, who have nothing to do with it, still get lumped in together with the leftists who are both Jews and Gentiles that have done so much to perpetuate this bullshit.
But I feel
it's very easy to conflate the two together.
Yeah.
No, but see, that's a
it's
reasonable
stupid.
thing. Like, for example, my recent video that came out yesterday, where I was critiquing this video on Instagram by Jerry Saltz, the art critic. By the way, Lev, if you could link that in the chat. It's like, when you have like a very stereotypical, like, tribal person like Jerry Saltz, who's saying things like the death of the fragile white males tearing each other apart, and it's good, and it's because he's reviewing these Carol Dunham paintings, and it's like, it's so amazing that that Trump is gone and we're going to destroy the white male. It's like, that's like a 4chan meme, you know what I mean? That it's like literally, it's man, I don't know what to say.
What I would say about the Jewish people in general has to do more with there was a very interesting book written by Yuri Seltskin, I believe that's how you say his name, and it talked about this, not an Apollonian, but a mercurial spirit. Since a lot of Jewish people for a long time, as you know, Nina, we've been living in the periphery of a lot of different civilizations, and even though there were obviously Jewish farmers and things of that nature, this periphery defined certain occupations, like, like anything that was kind of like what gypsies did, things that the Apollonian farmers and churchgoers didn't really want to do. And in a way, these occupations created this mutual differentiation between the Apollonians living in the central, like the farms in the city, versus all the people who were living in the outskirts. And, even to the extent that the Jewish people kind of wanted to, like those who wanted to be, within their own community, they wanted to be considered the stranger. They wanted to be considered apart from the Gentile. But then there were other Jewish people, like a lot of great, authors, artists, poets, who were, just like you could say Pushkin, who was, half or like a quarter black, where his grandfather Hannibal was brought over to Peter the Great from Africa. Just like Hay was responsible for creating what we would consider to be the modern Russian language. Just like that, there were so many Jewish artists who, back in their day, like Mandelstam, for example, who contributed to this, this culture, and they were like the demigods of civilization for wherever period or wherever, whatever country they were living in. So this whole idea of this, deculturalization or destabilization, I'm sorry, but it's fucking bullshit. Because we're talking about individuals here, some of whom decided to become leftists, some of whom decided to actually contribute to whatever civilization they were a part of and elevate it, spiritually elevate it. So that would be my defense to a lot of these things that keep being brought up, and that's all I got to say about that.
Well, I don't know, Lev. Like we say, like I think we have to have a show. I don't know, that'd be pretty dangerous though, where we bring on some people to debate whether the extent of the subversion. But don't, Chad, we keep interrupting you. I'm sorry, my friend.
Well, I strongly agree with Lev. You can oppose, organized Jewry or whatever word you want to use for it, but anyone who's trying to get way too esoteric and talk about inherent qualities of a Jewish soul or anything, it just strikes me that they've probably never hung out with a Jewish person or listened to an elderly Jewish man from Brooklyn tell Jewish jokes, or slept with a Jewish woman. Jewish people have quite a bit to offer in their own way, and I think the
Oh, thank you.
I think the very black and white anti-Semitism that you see a lot of dorks espousing.
Yeah, exactly.
It is ultimately, and this is what they don't want to hear. It's Abrahamic in nature. It's fundamentally adharmic because
Whoa.
if you understand that different tribes of man have different dharmas, have their own natural path that they follow, you would know that any attempt to eradicate Jewish people of their Jewishness, or something else that has similar words to that sentence that I'm not going to say, it's fundamentally adharmic. You're erasing the essential attribute of who Jewish people are.
Well, Chad, would you even know I was Jewish if I hadn't made this film? I mean, I didn't do anything.
Yes, I would.
I didn't, because like for years with friends, they'd be like, oh, like we're all like white people in the US. It's like, where are your ancestors from? Where are your ancestors from? And I'd be like, hey, guess where my ancestors were from? They would freaking guess Welsh.
That feel when you're so esoterically racist, you know so much about other races and you respect them and want them to live on in the future.
I mean, I did nothing with the so-called Jewish. Like I have a Jew card. Oh, let me show you my Jew card.
Oh,
with respect, madam, you've come on the show and described going on Jerry Springer in a dominatrix outfit, sleeping with transgender people, and you made your religious film. You made your religious film an allegory for relationship with your father, whilst using very.
No, the film obviously, since I made sadomasochism, that's obvious, right? But before I made sadomasochism, I never played the Jew card. And the Jew card was available, right? Like for years, there were like grants for Jewish filmmakers and grants for Jewish artists. And I would not apply for those grants because I was like, why? Like I get a grant for being Jewish. I'm just not going to do that. Like, I don't, why? I'm
touching my grandfather's cross really hard in this stream. I must.
But when I decided,
I want to get to the dominatrix part. But
okay. When I decided to make sadomasochism, I was like, okay, I'm gonna play the Jew card, right? Like this whole time. I haven't played on this. I haven't taken advantage of this in any way.
Being a black card.
Oh, look at you.
Exactly. Exactly. But I got to tell you, Hotep Sophia, the black card is worth about 30 Jew cards right now.
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Much more valuable.
It is infinitely more valuable than
we never had a Paisan card. That's unfortunate.
But really, like
it just became white people.
Just like, fuck off, Italians.
People are free to make fun of the Italians till the cows come home.
Well, leftists, instead of being racist, because back in the day, all of the Chapo-tards and all of they used to be SA goons, but then they had to stop like posting N-words, so now they have to attack Italians because, as you know,
they just make fun of white
like
people.
Hotep Sophia, I am a person of color, so.
What color are you?
Here.
Well, I'm Italian. That means I'm automatically black. So it's
used to be.
That's the me.
Oh, by the way, we have a comment from Bruce Bottinger who says you are visibly Jewish and visibly sexy.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, some of those photos from back in the day, they looked
from
quite
then, yeah. I was 27 when that photo was taken. So,
but Chad, wait to finish your you were going to comment on something else before, and maybe remix.
I suppose I could. Well, Nina, your refusal of the grants, the Hebrew grant, whatever you want to call it.
You are so weird. I'm sorry.
Your refusal of that grant, I think, gets to the heart of a lot of this whole discussion, which is that the state of the arts and the state of copyright and all that, it's a result of art no longer being an aristocratic thing. Personally, being an esotericist nerd with Kaczynski in my name, I would attribute that to spiritual decay and the industrial system, with everyone being taken away from the land and with the spiritual decay as the cycle of the ages continues. Art is now, in many cases, almost stripped of its spiritual value, and it's not an attempt to create a material representation of divine forces. It's a way to make money for a lot of people. And oftentimes what is popular in what's called the art world is based upon what is making that money. And I think copyright law is a result of the aristocrat being deprived of his rightful space as the artist of society, and the more mercantile peoples of the lower castes rising up into the art world. And I think the refusal of copyright law, the refusal of monetization of art, and the promotion of creating art for the sake of creating something valuable, divine, and meaningful to be seen by all is inherently an aristocratic trait.
Yeah.
That,
Oh,
and
100%
Nina, your
agree.
animation just looks really fucking cool.
Well,
Yes.
thank you, but you're missing folk art. I mean, music is really heavily copyrighted, and most music, I think, has been folk music from the dawn of time. And people never thought of it as property, and they never, I mean, you would pay the bard so that, like, if a bard was visiting, you wanted them to stay alive. It was a patronage
sort of thing.
You'd feed them, but I mean, there's folk art is a thing, and folk art was never copyrighted.
Folk art's a really complicated sort of thing now in the contemporary art world, unfortunately, because folk art itself has sort of succumbed to the forces of capital. But folk art, I think nowadays, is a lot of artists that I communicate with on the internet space, and the people that we've had on. I feel that is the real folk art underground, whereas the contemporary art world, unfortunately, is another. As much as I've had this role in the online right of defending a lot of contemporary art, it is an extension of academia nowadays, and it is totally controlled by capital, by the neoliberal order, and it is sort of a way of, I know it's simplistic to call it like just funneling money, but there's something about it that has been robbed of its genuine comportment towards the higher purpose in civilization, if you want to call it a spiritual purpose or a higher cultural purpose. And so I 100% agree with you, Chad. As an artist myself, I feel this sort of weight of having to balance, feeling worth within creation itself, because you have these ideas that, well, I'm an artist that will never get a Canadian culture grant ever. It'll never happen.
But you did get some grant recently, though, right?
Yeah, but that was a one-off, like, local thing. Like, when it comes
to the Jewish grant.
Yeah, but when it comes to the way things are run in the art world, like academia and like the publishing world, these things are slowly going to, I feel, unravel with its various contradictions, which is unfortunate, because I do feel that, unlike a lot of people I associate with, I do feel a lot of contemporary artists are out there, producing good works, but it's just that the monster machine, the art world, academic industrial complex, is suffocating that genuine meaning and that genuine aristocratic impulse to create without burden and to create for the higher purpose of art itself. And I feel that things will change as people accept that people outside of the system are going to gain more legitimacy.
Well, Gio, you're talking about the art world. You're talking about, and as far as that world is concerned, fine art is a form of currency for elites.
Yeah,
it's a storage system for money. And I did a piece that I guess maybe Lev could look this up and post it somewhere. If you look up $10,000 quilt, and I wrote this essay to go with the piece where that's all it is. It's just ways for very wealthy people to store money, and it's traded that way.
And animation is different in like the contemporary art world, the fine art context, because there is animation there, but it's not narrative driven. There's a lot of like contemporary artists that have backgrounds in animation that are doing like singular pieces.
Right, they're doing pieces that can be invested in. The whole point, the whole art world
that can be projected into a gallery.
All of the art world, all it is custom currency. It's like, instead of having currency that has, these etchings, these US government etchings on it, when you have enough money, you can choose what image your currency has. They don't actually make currency in high enough denominations. But once you're going up into like the $10 million denomination of currency, it looks like a painting or
but it's the same thing with music. I mean,
music is
interject that. It's the same thing. You have the artists out here creating great music, but the ones who actually get paid for it, that are signed to the label. I mean, WAP is a great example of this. I mean, if you look at Cardi B and Meg the Boy Horse, I mean, this is what their music is worthless. Like, but except for the fact that the media made it to be this huge hit, it was, basically promoted by everyone. And so like, it's going to make somebody a lot of money, not the artist. I mean, it's a huge currency, but what is it actually conveying? It's nothing. It's not nearly like a good song or anything else, but this is what they've done with the whole music world. They've just literally turned artists into pieces of currency, and they literally just use them for as long as they can, or as long as they're valuable in their whole chess game. And then when you're unvaluable, you don't own your music anymore. Look at Whitney Houston. She died with like nothing because she didn't actually write any of her own songs. And the people who do write their own music, they have an extremely difficult time crossing those type of divides. The only superstars are people who don't write their own music, except for Taylor Swift.
You know what's crazy is that there's this art critic, I think his name is Chris Ott. He had this series of YouTube videos, and he used to write for Pitchfork. And he said, like, that's basically the way the contemporary music world like controls artists. They like take these underground indie bands and they'll like plaster them onto like Fader or Pitchfork or all of these cash cows for these corporations, because young people, they watch them, they read their articles and everything, and they control the image of these bands. And it's like, oh, look, all the kids, hello, fellow kids, you have to go and pay attention to these bands, and you're going to go to this underground party in Williamsburg. And oh, by the way, this underground party is now sponsored by Absolute Vodka. So they can like control the image of those bands. And it's like, it's terrible. Like, the music industry is dead nowadays, and the contemporary art world is not long for this world either. But who knows what's gonna happen.
But Nina, are you able to right now garner enough support with the people who can appreciate, actually good art and be able to make a living from that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you're all talking about really different things as art. I mean, the first thing I would eliminate is this, what Gio called the art world, right? Like I'm not in that world. None of us are. Popular musicians, they're also not in this so-called art world. They're in the music industry. They're industrial product, which is also, it's also not something I'm in. And certainly film has a corollary to that, right? Like we call it Hollywood. That's the, it's all totally commodified, right? And culturally, I don't mesh really well with Hollywood. Many people would say this is to my detriment, but I just don't like it. Right. So also art, I mean, when you were talking about folk art, I was thinking, what is folk art today? And I'm like, it's internet memes, right? Like this podcast is folk art, to be honest.
Yes.
Exactly.
So I currently, since I left New York, my living expenses are like close to nothing. I am living with I'm in Central Illinois. I live in my mom's house, and I just don't have expenses like I had in New York. So I don't actually have to make much money right now. I don't want to make no money. I mean, I have some expenses, but compared to New York, it's just like so cheap. So, and also I have friends here who are like war tax resistors, And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. You can live here cheaply enough that you can be a war tax resistor just by not making enough money to pay war tax. So
Wait, when you say war tax, do you mean like all the taxes we pay, part of which go into the military-industrial complex?
yes. And actually, I realize there are other ways to think about taxes where that actually makes no sense at all. So it's kind of an old thinking that I had about taxes, to think of them in terms of war taxes.
Interesting. I don't even know what what the bonds are. Do you remember they used to have Bugs Bunny, selling the bonds? Like,
They still have
what are
bonds.
they still? Okay.
They have
Yeah, I'm not too-
there's tons of the bond. I live in Maryland, and they're always selling bonds to build stuff and so on. But this whole not having to make a lot of money is exactly what I was talking about yesterday. Because literally, if artists would just focus on, if they would go live in areas where your cost of living is not expensive, and then you could focus on your art, whatever it is, your talent, your passion. But too many people are caught up in this whole, you have to live in a city, you have to have this, particular kind of lifestyle. But with the internet, it's completely unnecessary, because you can live in the middle of nowhere and your house is like $100 a month, like for a decent sized house, and you pay next to nothing for groceries and everything else, and literally make money sitting at home on the internet. Like, there's so many opportunities, but people have really been brainwashed into this whole concept of having to live in these high class areas and get involved in these completely, like high lifestyles, so that they can mesh with these people that ultimately are using them as a pawn. It's completely ridiculous. And I really wish there was something that we could do to convince people that, it's not icky to live in the country. Like, it's just not, living in the Midwest is not like the worst possible thing that could happen to you. I mean, so many people just have this whole, country phobia. And I'm from the country, so it drives me nuts. Like, no, the country is fine. It's not scary. Where
you're from? Where are you living now?
I'm in Maryland. I'm from PG County, which is right outside of DC. But the area that I'm from is rural. But we got caught up in this whole Maryland tax thing. So now our cost of living is much higher.
Yeah.
But it used to be extremely low, like, to live in this area. But now with all the stuff they're expanding the government so much that it ruined my area. So I'm gearing up to move. But literally, like, it used to cost next to nothing. And like, our cost of living was so low, but now it's just like, it's skyrocketed sort of out of nowhere. And, when you live down a dirt road, it's kind of hard to, for me, having lived down a dirt road is extremely difficult to justify living in an apartment. Like, I just don't understand it. I'm like, no, give me my dirt road. This is fine. Let's go outside and pick some fruit or whatever. Like, it's fine. But a lot of people are told, oh, well, you can't live like that. You need to be able to have a Whole Foods and this and that. My county still doesn't have a Whole Foods. It's the richest Black county in America. We have no Whole Foods. So I don't understand. Like, it's just, people just need to give up this whole, I have to live in modernity. I just do what you love and figure out a way to do it where you don't have to go into huge amounts of debt, and you might actually like enjoy your life.
Yeah, well, I think the hugest amount of debt people have now is college. That's devastating. But I just want to say though that like when I was younger, I loved living in cities, right? Like I'm so glad not to be in one now, but there's just something, and I
needed to meet people to be in the city, to be honest, because I like was living in a village for a bit, and I like kind of fucking hated it in terms of like being able to like meet people. It's just, you just really can't. It's like, at least I've got like my flat and stuff. I've got like people I can speak to and like a shared living space, and got people across the hall and shit like that. So just, I don't know. I don't think living in a city is the worst thing in the world, especially when you're young. When you're older, you want to be like, fuck off, like everyone else. Now I know who I want to be with. You go into some like little cottage when you're like 50. That sounds like a good time for it.
Well, no, I think it's a good idea if you don't want to if at some point you want to start saving money, or I mean, I guess it goes to when you want to start a family. So I'm one of these, people who are like advocating for people to start families before they turn 40. Maybe like 20 would be better to start having kids instead of waiting for 35. So if you live in the city and you want to have a kid, all you're thinking about is, I have to do this, I have to do that. The costs just add up. But if you live in somewhere where the school system is at least remotely decent, you can send your kids to school and you can feed them, and it's not like going to be this huge extra expense, then you're more likely to start having kids sooner, as opposed to you live in the city, you're going to wait because you're like, man, I can only afford a 1-bedroom apartment. I can't afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Or I have to buy uniforms for kids, or daycare is $600 a week for infants.
Actually,
Kind of hard to start a family.
Yeah, well, and also when I lived in cities, all these artists were like, oh yeah, I would love to make, this piece that I actually care about, but I can't because I have to do this and that and the other thing for the work, which actually it reminds me about what you were saying about having children. And as somebody that has never wanted to have children, I just want to say that you can reproduce culturally as well as biologically. And actually, especially for women, because so much of the childcare falls on women.
And by the way, Info Warlock, I would disagree with your statement. I think that Sophia's monologues are extremely relevant to what we're talking about here.
Everyone gives monologues, man. We've all got to give a monologue. It's the Break the Monologue podcast, so someone's got to come in like me.
And by the way, one thing that I have not been doing this entire podcast because of that whole D-Live debacle, so we're going to have to figure out how we're going to approach D-Live from now on, because I don't want the YouTube Jannies to go against it. Anyway, what I wanted to get to here is, guys, subscribe right now. Everybody who is watching, subscribe to this channel. We got to grow this thing. We got to expand to all these other networks. And you got to understand, we are doing this for the long haul. We want free speech. We want, all the craziness to go on in the chat, while at the same time making sure that we can function and that we can survive. They're purging creators left and right, like Nina, like now on Twitter, they've been purging so many people, so many of the people that we've been following. Like Gio, you've seen this too, right?
Well, yeah, but the recent purge on Twitter, that was probably due to things like the election coverage and they're really going apoplectic. Like, there's people that I know for a fact do not post like, naughty no words or offend people. Wow, it's incredible.
You can get kicked off of Twitter for sharing the dictionary definition of woman.
Yeah, even if just a mod doesn't like you, then you're gone, right?
Yeah, that's hate speech. Dictionary and hate speech.
But we are always in the presence of the enemy on social media sites. So, and myself, are you going to do some more performance art this stream?
Well, I was trying. The thing is, I didn't get a good chance to decide why. I don't know why I put on like a bunch of shirts. This is the thing I've got going on. This is what I've got.
Oh, wow. Yeah, myself, he always comes on.
Sweating. I was like, I'm still sweating.
He's done various things. He's painted himself red. He's on stream. He's put his camera in a blender on stream.
So, this is the blender guy.
Yeah, blender guy. That was blender guy.
I showed somebody that clip. It was left. Oh, you need to make a short of that.
I need to make a short of a lot of things, Sophia. You're absolutely right. There's like a list.
Sweating. It's just like I could just. I kind of want to just cut like a knife down and ruin all my shirts, but I think that's a bit too extreme even for me.
So he's like myself is like the G.G. Allen of BTR. That's the best way. Like, I don't know, Nina, if you grew up around the time that G.G. Allen was hanging out, and I mean, you were.
Well, she was on Jerry Springer. She must know about G.G. Allen.
I dated a guy who toured with G.G. Allen once.
Whoa!
Damn. Beast.
Wow.
Was it the nudist drummer?
No, I don't think so. Yeah,
so that's amazing.
Trans people and G.G. Allen crew.
So you were that's another topic I wanted to discuss. I read this article you wrote about sex work. I hate using that term, but you were a domination for a time.
Yeah, people should really read that article. That article was hard to write. My goodness, it took me a long time to write it. It was a bit of a.
So for people who didn't read it, maybe just give a brief
Yeah, you
synopsis.
can just put the link in there. Yeah, I mean it's like I'm 52 now. I am so happy to like not have a sex drive now.
Oh God,
It's fantastic. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, there's like a little one, right? But like I was so driven when I was young, and I just think about the.
Oh, I took two off there. Okay.
Everybody subscribe to the stream right now for the sake of myself.
How many? Oh my God.
That was like 9 or 10 shirts.
That was pretty much. Yeah, that was. I
Pull
lost
them
count.
off now. There you go.
Stop.
Watch the nipples.
Yeah, no nipples, or else they're gonna janny us off the screen.
Exactly.
So, lower yourself down.
That's
Myself,
what you
lower
just
yourself
said.
down.
Why am I doing this anything?
Yeah, we don't know your gender, so you could be
Lower, no,
no,
we saw the nipple. No, go down, go
It's
down.
fine. Okay. Okay, it's fine.
down.
Never allow nipples
Okay,
on
it's fine.
But anyway, when I think about like all the shit I did and just the trouble I got into, and just because it was like hormones, and it's like, what the hell? I mean, I think of myself as, a reasonable, intelligent person, but it's so hard to live with that.
So you mean to tell me that a Jewish woman is a dominatrix, and people paid money for you to dominate them sexually?
People. What?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Sexually?
I'm getting.
And if so, what were the rates?
Well,
You got a real crush in her, don't you, Chad Kaczynski?
This is before I made sadomasochism, let me tell you. And also, at this time, you really need to read the article. I mean, I realize this is like fodder for jokes, but that's one of the problems with talking about it this way, is that we just sort of fall into people's expectations of what this.
Well, it kind of does remind me in a way.
On himself.
This pen doesn't even work.
I know. It's invisible ink.
Invisible ink,
chemical
unfortunately.
on it for it to show up.
So when it comes to something like going back to circumcision for a second, I don't know if this is exactly why it was done, but beyond like any of the health-related reasons they talked about, the what do you call it? The foreskin. It is the most sensitive part of a man's penis. And once you get rid of that, the sensation is not going to be as intense.
All right,
And
okay.
Well, it's true, though. I mean, let's be honest. If we're talking about biology, like that is what happens.
But Lev, you only have yours, right? You don't know what it's like. Now,
they've done studies that men who still have it intact, they experience quotidians of pleasure more. And the whole thing about infections, that's largely nonsense.
Right. No, I'm not an advocate of circumcision at all.
No, I'm just. I know when this topic comes.
My personal experience.
What is myself doing?
Rather extensive and with a variety is, in spite of all of this, there's, from my perspective, there has been negligible difference, like in terms of the, not scientifically measured, but as I would measure response. It's been negligible, and I'm opposed to circumcision. I mean, unless people want to do it themselves.
But the reason I was mentioning it
but
has to do with the lack of if there is a lack of pleasure that men would feel from this, according to the studies. And again, I can't testify to anything but my own experience.
Well, there's a big subculture of people, unfortunately, that regret it. And, yeah.
But what I was getting to here is slightly different, though. When you compare that to something like, let's say, Christian monks, or Buddhist monks for this matter, shaving their hair, there is, like with the whole legend of Samson, whose hair, it's like
Right.
really long and it gives him strength, vigor. Or if you look at somebody like Maria Orsic, who, if you don't know, she was the one of the ladies of the Vril Society or Thule Society, the progenitor of like the Nazi Party back in the day, like this occult organization that supposedly made contact with UFOs and stuff like that. Anyway, she had
The
really
UFOs
long
are
hair.
demons.
Like, yes, she had long hair like Cousin It from the Addams Family. And there was this idea that the longer hair you have, the more you're able to, like with an antenna, connect it to more, like spiritual things. And in a way, like when the monks shave their hair, you think, wait, aren't they supposed to be spiritual? Why would they shave their hair? The reason that I was given is that they are letting their sensory extensions not function, so they would not be of the earth, but that they would singly focus just on receiving the Lord and not receiving
Right.
any of the other nature spirits or anything of that sort. So in a way, like leaving us as we are with the long flowing hair, with the foreskin, with whatever, it is like extensions to feel sensuality, because nature, like Shakti or whatever you want to call it, like the cycle of birth and death and all that, this is in a way the spirit being kept within Maya, being kept within this whole cosmic dance, as opposed to getting out of it and going, somewhere beyond. So in a way, I think a lot of these religious practices, in their more esoteric natures, that may be what they have been alluding to. This sort of like getting out of the cycle of death and rebirth through all these various processes. Now, that is just my take, and I'm not saying that's exactly what was going on, but I'm curious what you think.
Sure. Sure. I mean, we're such creatures of civilization, right? Like we talked. Nice scissors. Myself is really trying to get attention. It's working.
That's my whole shtick is just doing my own thing. Really, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we're trying to have a conversation here. The non sequitur. Yeah, I mean that's I've heard the thing about the long hair. I just wanted to break in with the thing about the circumcision, which is that it doesn't have as big an effect as people claim that it does, unless something goes wrong, and I have encountered that as well. But we live in civilization, and there's lots of denial involved. I mean, none of us live anything like our pre-civilized ancestors do. None of us, go out and we're very cut off from the natural world that we came from. And we're all very heady, right? We're very literate. There's a great book called, I think it's called Orality and Literacy. I think I have a copy of it here, which talks about how differently fundamentally you think when you are literate. So people who do not read, or I should say, who are in cultures where that's okay, where they're not like persecuted for that, but pre-literate cultures, just completely different to a way that we can't really even imagine thinking that way. We are so civilized and we can't go back. It's like once you're literate, you cannot become pre-literate.
I mean, there is a way through meditation to I guess for my own
Return
personal
to monkey.
experiences. Yeah, well, not exactly return to monkey. I mean, like, if we flip it the other way around, if we say that it may be possible, and take it however you want, but it may be possible for human beings to have more of a internal communication, for them to be able to, like, I don't know, like, be able to have such a strong intuition that you can look at somebody and you could sense what exactly they're thinking. I'd say that as a baseline, people have described things like that. I haven't personally experienced that, although, you could kind of tell, like, but anyway, I wonder where the end is. I wonder where the limitation is. Like, my whole thing, Nina, is I see the entire existence as being made. I know this may be egocentric or whatever, but I see it being made for the sake of having the experiences all of us are having as the experiencers. as opposed to just a random process of events. And that's why I think that there are other experiences we can have where we can be much more in tune with other people. Like, think of the Satya Yuga, for example, the golden age in Advaita Vedanta, wherein Satya means truth. How do you make a truthful society? Well, a truthful society would exist if you could kind of tell what everybody else was thinking all the time. That way everybody would be on the same page and there wouldn't be as much friction. We would be seen more as like the fingers of a hand, you know, but as at the same time being aware of that. Because I think like animals, like schools of fish, if you notice like the beautiful patterns like the birds go into and the zebras when they're running across the savannah, they do seem to act like hands, like fingers of a hand. And I think human beings could also get into that mode while at the same time being more aware of themselves as both this collective as well as individuals at the same time. Now,
well,
we do
act like fingers of a hand. I don't know. Have you ever seen Koyaanisqatsi?
No, what's that?
Oh, was that the
movie.
first film with Samsara and Baraka? That was the first one, right? They made in the 80s. Fist.
Yeah, I mean, all of these patterns, you can see humans acting in these patterns as well. We're not conscious of it, but we move in herds and we move in, so that movie has that. But, arg, shoot, so much at once. All right, so there are moments, yes, certainly we can experience moments of communion with reality. But what we don't do, for example, because we are literate, is we do not communicate culture as we used to. I mean, how do you memorize an epic poem, right? There was no writing things down. There was, you would sing like
song, yeah.
the way music and memory work together. They really help people communicate cultural things, and we don't do that. We don't sit around and sing to each other.
I'm kind of glad we don't do that. I don't know. Like, I like the idea of reading, but I don't want to sing.
We used
together.
to.
We do
a little bit.
In my community, we do.
Yeah,
especially within the churches.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge thing, and my family particularly, we definitely engage in that type of, especially through music, because I come from a musical family, so we definitely engage in that type of passing of the culture through music. But it is, again, one of those things that if you are not like with your family or whatever the case may be, it's just not something that's necessarily going to be strong, a strong presence in your life anymore. But there are in the country, it's kind of a common thing, I think.
Cool. I was once not once. I was twice at this Russian animation festival that takes place on a boat called Krok. Yes. And the first time I went, which was it was like 2000 approximately, they sang. Like they all had instruments and they got together and sang.
Yes.
And it was great. Right? They also drank their asses off, which is not something I can do.
I'd say the two could be connected.
Yeah.
Oh god.
The French do this. The Germans,
Italians do it.
Especially, a great first world way to see this is go on vacation. If you go on vacation to any resort, you'll see the different communities, right, and how they act. Germans,
not at a resort. No, at a resort you're just isolated from everything.
No, not necessarily. No, I mean at the people at the resort. You know what I'm talking about, right?
This is why resorts must be banned. They're not.
Yeah, they're not great, but they're not good. But what you will see is this. You'll see how, there'll be a group of Spaniards or a group of Germans or a group of French or a group of whatever, and they'll act different than the rest of the people that are there. Often it's kind of cultural, specifically cultural, right? Like the Germans will get super hammered, but they'll
all get super hammered. That's the thing. It's like the French will get super hammered and the Germans will get super hammered.
French guys are very they start hitting on people legitimately. You see these things, right? Right. The sort of nuances of the culture start to get shown in these ways, and I think music is a great example of this. A lot of the people that I know that are sort of like English or British, they don't have this thing. They don't.
Sorry, are you saying the British don't drink excessively on holiday? Is that seriously
Oh
what you're
no,
trying to
no,
say?
I'm not saying that they don't drink excessively on holiday, and they definitely do sing together.
We're like notoriously the worst people abroad.
Well,
Like
British-
Yeah, you are.
the
You are.
British.
Well, young British women, they go to India for vacations and they buy that particular pattern of pants and they have relations with a Indian guru and they discover themselves that way. So
Sounds
happened?
familiar.
But so, anyways, I wanted to move on to that article where you were talking about how you were involved in like the first, like, what would you call it? Was the third wave the 90s, like third waver,
Yes.
sex positive.
The sex posy, yes, the sex positive movement.
Sex positive.
Sex posy.
Yeah. So you were involved in that scene, and
absolutely.
This was when feminism really went from strictly culture warrior stuff to really cementing itself within culture itself. So you had like Riot Girl, like Bikini Kill, stuff like that. And you had
I mean, when you say this is when feminism did blah blah blah, it's
yeah,
like,
I know, it's kind of
there's always been. I mean, first,
there was like, you know, Marilyn Minter, Laurie Simmons in the art world, and there was
I mean, Andrea. So like I think I wrote in the article that I never. At that time, I didn't read Andrea Dworkin because she was a dirty word. And it was in a different article I wrote was about Andrea
Is that
Dworkin.
really ugly lady, right? Am I remembering?
Well, yeah.
But
it turns out,
right?
It turns out by hindsight, she was based in Red Pill. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. There's that debate, like there's that debate nowadays, like turfs to the real trad wives sort of deal. But no, so this was the 90s. This was sex positivity. This was
there were different things. So this was the
angry lesbians with acoustic guitars.
It was the beginning of the end. No, the 80s was the beginning of the end of what we would call radical feminism. I didn't even know radical feminism existed.
By the second Reagan term, it was already
quick question. Philip Daniel asks, what does Nina think of Camille Paglia?
That is a great question, right? So when I think about when I was younger and believed that I thought for myself, but really was much more influenced by the people around me. For example, that's the reason I didn't read Andrea Dworkin. That's the reason that I read hardly any Camille Paglia because, and I still haven't, but I did something when I was young that I don't feel terrible about it because it's a typical young person thing, right? But I was on some same radio show that Camille Paglia was on. She went on before me, and I made this cartoon just mocking her because I had only read, I did that thing where friends that didn't like Camille Paglia had like a few quotes from Camille Paglia, and they were like, "Oh, she said this, right? She's horrible because she said this," and I was like, yeah, that is horrible. Okay, I'm not going to bother reading her whole book.
What was the book Gio tried to get me to read? The 720-page one. Because that was the first thing. Like, I asked Gio for a book recommendation. It's like, just read the 720-page essay.
Anyway, my point. I don't want to get off track here.
No,
right?
Sorry.
I didn't read her thing. I did a cartoon mocking her as though this is what young people do, right? Like, if there had been a cancel thing for cancel Camille Paglia, I would have participated in that because that's what young people do. They base their opinions on what the people around them have, and they don't actually read the stuff in question and think about it critically. So yeah, my take on Camille Paglia is I still haven't read her stuff. I just feel a little bit bad having been canceled myself as an older person.
Should have listened.
That I was, that I did that so easily and so uncritically.
Did she respond to the cartoon, by the way?
No, of course not. It's just a dumb cartoon. I mean, she shouldn't. It's like, I get worse shit than that about me all the time.
I wonder if someone digs it up now.
To.
By the way, I found it. I'm gonna.
Oh, you already found it. Brilliant.
I was going to say that Cedar Masochism, Seder. Seder Masochism actually comes off with a lot of similar themes to Sexual Persona. So maybe you should finally read Sexual Persona.
Yeah, and I have friends that have that have read her more recently, and they're like, she's actually interesting, you know. And so and I can
It's a
believe
lot
that,
of
but
text.
This is total like late 80s, early 90s cartoon stuff. Wow, this is real shit. But yeah, so you were in the sex positivity culture and you were a dominatrix, and you were talking about how you felt incredibly alienated from that scene because you were told by people around you that it's meaningless and it's not real sex, it's not real sexuality.
not that it's meaningless, but
Not
just
meaningless,
that
but
it's not like I believed that it wasn't sex, right? Because people said like, oh, it's no sex, you know, it's like it's power dynamics, it's theater, it's blah blah. I mean, the fact was, I was, you know, really skinny at that time. My head was I buzzed my head and wore a wig and put on a ton of makeup, and I looked hot. Right. And in spite of all of this bullshit around it, what these men were paying for was to interact with a hot looking young woman with a lot of makeup on in a skimpy costume.
How long did you do this for? The whole
this was
thing.
before the OnlyFans.
No, I know, but how long was it like a thing for? Like, how long did you consistently do this?
Oh, how long did I do it?
Yeah.
I don't know, like half a year.
Okay, not too long.
Maybe more. Maybe, I mean, it was like part of an entire year of discovery, exploration, and experimentation.
God.
Do you ever feel
but
do you ever feel like we're reducing their sense of like self-worth by doing shit like that? Like, I don't know. I feel like all that kind of shit makes like prostitution and porn just makes like men feel shit about themselves at the end of the day. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a healthy attitude towards sex. But the thing is, at the time, I knew that, and that's what I was writing about, was it's like if older me talked to younger me and tried to say, don't do this, that you can't actually put into words the way that it fucks you up. And I would not have believed it if I hadn't experienced it. It had a devastating effect on my libido. Although I don't mind, you know, it's like, that's a whole other.
But there was that chart that was posted, which I haven't really taken the deep look at, but it was basically showing how, like, the fewer sex partners a woman would have across her lifetime, like, the more she would. Yeah, the more pair bonding. Like, I don't know, like, I haven't taken that deep of a look to see whether that happens or whether there are exceptions to it. But what's been always interesting to me personally is that we had on Alexander Bard. I don't know, Nina, if you know him. He's a very interesting Swedish guy. I bet the two of you would have a great time talking with each other. But he talked about how there is a class of people who he also puts in, like, you know, sexual entertainers, things of that nature, into this... what was that word? Like this tantric practitioner class. And he says that it's important for them to be separate from, like, the normies, from people who may be honestly better off just, like, finding somebody in high school and marrying them and all that. And I understand that people have horrible experiences there too. Like, you could wind up with somebody that you have no love for whatsoever. But then the big question to me has always been, with the advent of more of a liberalistic outlook on life, in terms of, like, the big numbers, like huge numbers of people who may be more like somebody who would be much more easily influenced one way or another from advertising, from school, from their community. The question is, what is the right kind of input for most people in order to, number one, make sure that the true artists, people who are able to, you know, create really beautiful things, aren't held down by an oppressive system, while at the same time allowing there to be harmony amongst most people to continue having more solid communities?
Yeah, I got no answers, and it's not like I can look at the stuff I did and just go like, that was, you know, immoral and wrong. It's like I can't do that. I can say that it fucked me up, and that I'll say this about sex though. Sex really is a mystery, and it is treated like it's not. And and I remember coming of age and knowing, you know, like having people say that. And I was like, but why? And I had to do all this shit, right? Like I had to break it for myself in my pursuit of understanding it. Ultimately, there's no real understanding of it. You can break it or not.
But I feel, but that's the danger, is that people go through this without truly understanding, and then when you have a culture that promotes, it's funny, we have a, you could say that we have a culture that promotes meaningless transient sterile relations, but in actuality we have a culture that at one end is oversexed, but at the other end we are the generation that has the least amount of sexual.
You have the least sex and you have the most
encounters.
Porn. I feel so bad for y'all. So like
I hate porn.
I'm heartened to hear that.
But that's the thing, but it's so crazy to see someone like yourself who went through that like 90s sex positivity that really morphed itself. In actuality, it morphed itself into the early to mid 2000s, where the newer millennial generation of feminists came up, and they were influenced by like reading fucking Jezebel and stuff like that. So, but to see you lived through all of that, and now you're coming out the other end, no pun intended, but there's consequences to.
Yeah. I'm not a prude, right? Like, and I thought like, oh, you're either.
No, I would not figure you for a prude. Don't worry.
It's like I had this, but the thing with like the young people today that are canceling me and who are acting so righteous and so religious, and I mean, I have some compassion for them, right? They're incredibly annoying, but I was them. I mean, I acted like that. It was a phase that I went through.
Well, at least you weren't a furry.
At least I was. That's.
Oh God.
I don't know how many women furries.
These people never come out of that phase, though. They just go from. I mean,
well,
like
that's why being
I'm
trans
35.
is so fucked up.
These people have been like this since they were 16. I mean, people I've known from like elementary school. They're the same exact way with the judgmental and the canceling. And if you don't follow the exact path that everyone else follows, they just write you off as a non-entity. I mean, I just wonder, with my generation specifically, are they ever even going to come out of it? Because I don't see light at the end of the tunnel.
High school is forever for the millennials.
There's a good question in the chat. Is sex positivity porn really? Feels like another construction.
Yeah,
I mean,
a different thing.
In reality, like you have to look at the old school radical feminists, the ones that are still here, like Derek Jensen, who talks about how
Derek Jensen. Okay, well, your terminology is a little. I love Derek Jensen. Actually, you're not talking about Derek Jensen. You're talking about the other Jensen.
Yeah, no. But Derek Jensen, the deep ecologist. You know.
he's great, but you're tossing the word around feminist in an.
But he calls himself a radical, like a rad fem, like an old.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. No, because he knows.
But he's a second waver. He's one of the.
Yeah, no, he's into radical feminist analysis for sure. And he applies. He's gender critical, and he applies that analysis.
Oh, obviously, yeah. He had a great interview recently with Keith Woods, of all people, which, I mean, I think Derek is in his point in his career where he doesn't care if people like.
No, I love Derek Jensen. I love him. It's just that I don't think Derek Jensen would really be down. Like, I think he understands feminism enough.
Yeah.
So that he would not call himself a radical feminist.
Right. Okay, I understand.
Because he is a man.
Yeah, I'm using the 80s definition. So yeah, he really doesn't care about being canceled at this point. I mean, even going on with controversial figures like Keith Woods does really important work, but but anyways, that's besides the point. What he
we have a great go on.
Go ahead.
And then I'll say the comment.
Yeah. So he says that he talks about how sex positivity is a way of the dominator ego of capital to recapitulate its further, like, and I disagree with it, obviously, but in some ways I disagree, but he's right in the sense that it's a way to instantiate a more nuanced form of domination of the female body and the female essence by selling them an identity that this is ultimately liberation. So through false liberation, you get an even more elaborate form of alienation through sex positivity, because now if you convince young women that doing OnlyFans is not just a way to get rich, but a way, and of course OnlyFans is a way of, let's face it, they're doing research as we speak about how it filters young women into prostitution. By saying that all of this stuff is good, you're really just objectifying women and the female body even more, but doing it in such a sophisticated and nuanced way that you're selling them an identity of liberation that conveniently is also very suitable to be commodified, and to, capitalist realism can work to further instantiate this false liberation that really is just another form of alienation. But anyways, Lev, go ahead. It's very theory stylish type shit.
No, I wanted that's I would agree with all of that, and I would also say that I'm so when Lev posted without irony or rancor, as a selling point for this podcast, that I had done an interview with Jordan Peterson. Now, most of the circles that I interact with, they hate Jordan Peterson, right? I like Jordan Peterson, but they hate him. I mean, mostly I'm pretty
well, Nina, you didn't really know that much about what BTR was. The only thing you remember is we went to this nice Japanese restaurant with Shabana back in the day, New York Animation Community 2004. All of a sudden, I message you about this. You don't know what you like. I understand why you would have that reaction to oh my God, he posted Jordan Peterson.
No, it's good.
No.
Yeah,
no, but the point here is that I think that because BTR was able to connect with a community of people that have gone far beyond Jordan Peterson into, the conversations we were having today, going into a lot of deep waters, it's a very important thing to be able to bring people like yourself on and other people who are from, a generation that's not crazy, and to be able to speak with people who are
crazy. Yeah.
Well, relatively speaking, being able to bring in people
really
from your generation and talk with people who I think a lot of people in Gen Z have been recoiling, relatively speaking, a lot.
We're all fucked up with. I think we're honestly this whole it's not just Corona. It's this whole fucking weird thing with human existence, and we're going in some fucking weird path. I feel super alienated from everything. This is why I come on here, have an existential crisis, drawing on myself. It's just
exactly.
I don't know.
But anyway, what I was trying to say about Jordan Peterson and all this, and what you're saying about porn, is so a lot of the feminists that I know, they really hate him, and I'm just he's not a feminist, okay? He's not. I actually think he's pretty clueless about women, but also I don't care, because he speaks to men and he's saying things to men that I want men to engage with, right? I'm so heartened by hearing y'all thinking critically about porn. That's not something I hear much from men. And my understanding is that Jordan Peterson is critical of porn as well. And it's this is awesome, right? Because if you heard a bunch of feminists criticizing porn and telling you that porn is bad, you're not going to listen to us. And also you don't necessarily care. It's men need to talk about porn with other men, right? This is porn addiction is largely a men's issue, and men have to talk about it and men have to solve it, just as women's liberation is a woman's issue, right? So I don't expect Jordan Peterson to get it or talk about it or promote it. I am really happy that men are doing this, and I'm also happy that I finally personally figured out that it's not men's responsibility. I don't want men to be feminists, right? It's silly. It's men have men's experiences. I have women's experience. So feminism's for women.
While we're on the subject of Jordan Peterson, I'd like to remind everyone listening to say a prayer that he might finally be liberated from his succubus daughter.
Yes.
Additionally, if you watch porn, you're well, I want to use words to describe you. I don't know how YouTube.
No,
like,
don't
people feel-
insult people because people are going through like a bunch of fucking shit. Like I try and cut that shit out. It's just the problem.
Yeah,
with porn-
but that's just not how you talk to men. If you really want men to kick a bad habit, you can't coddle them. You have to remind
No,
them that
I'm
you're
not
a fuck.
coddling, but it's just like
have to bully
excessive
side
insulting
them.
doesn't fucking
You
explain
you
the
got
issue.
you got to bully
That's right.
people.
No, you
You've
don't.
got to
you don't.
remind
Yes, you do.
people. You've got to remind people of what they're doing to themselves and what they're becoming. You got to remind people that you look like a fucking loser sitting hunched over a
Yes, you
computer
do, but
monitor,
you've got to
jerking
give them
yourself off.
motivation
But Chad,
rather than
I
just
think
calling them a loser.
Well, Chad, I think that there is already a mechanism that reminds people of that way better than anybody saying anything. All these
Post-nut
memes that are
clarity.
all these memes that are coming out right
Exactly.
now. All these memes that are
Post-tweet
coming out right
clarity.
now of like what do you call it? Like the soy face. Like Nina, have you heard of soy face?
No.
Okay, so
Oh,
when somebody
meme
gets
culture
really
you would
excited
find
about
very
a product, they would open their mouth wide and make this smile, and it looks completely fake. And
Not a
they
smile,
see a lot
it's
of
a
people.
thing of,
Find the
it's an
soy
expression
face.
of pain. That's what it is.
Yes,
The
it
soy
is an
face.
expression of pain in a way. But the idea here is that there's so many examples that I think whatever's going on right now in society and the way things are being self-corrected through the virtue of actually having images online that people can look at and see this is an example of somebody who is addicted to porn, or this is an example of somebody who values all these little Star Wars knickknacks, while not caring about his girlfriend banging some other guy, and just this idea of weakness going back to this whole idea of like that whole quote about strong men make good times make weak men make bad times. So the idea, and bad times make strong men. The idea is, I think a lot of people today want to become the strong men of the bad times that they're currently in, because they are seeing a lot of weakness. They're not seeing that much of an example of like leadership or somebody who embodies certain great archetypes. Like back in the day, you could say that the same people exist today, but if you look at the 20th century, you do end up seeing so many different historical figures, regardless of whether they're, good or evil or whatever, who inhabited a certain quality that will make them stand out as classic figures throughout history. And today it's like, who can we point at and say, okay, this is an example of someone who has, that high of a degree of character. It almost seems like people have degraded. And I'm not saying this is the case. I'm saying this is the impression people are getting today online, that people have degraded to such an extent because of all the creature comforts that they, that there's no great example to follow and people feel lost. But some people want to be that person. Some people want to take matters into their own hands and elevate themselves up spiritually, physically. This is why we do have a lot of these esoteric bodybuilding communities on Twitter rising up right now, because they don't like the weakness and they want to get better. But I don't know, like, have you been exposed to this other side of it, basically, where people are reacting to what they perceive as weakness? And I'm just curious what you think about that.
I can tell you what came to mind when you were talking was weakness and stuff aside. I think all of us, but especially younger generations, because we spend so much time on the internet, we are alienated from our own bodies and from physical reality. And, even I struggle with this, and I didn't grow up with the internet, but just, and porn is part of this, right? Like, people are not, you youngsters, you're not, getting jiggy with each other. You're using porn, which is a lot more convenient.
The body is no longer a vector for communication or intimacy. Like in the early internet days, the way they envisioned things being that you had transportable avatars between sites where you would like go into physical like VR worlds with your avatar and you would shop, like there would be a physical shop, kind of like Second Life. But nowadays the consumer model of the internet has basically eliminated the need for the body itself. And there's a weird sort of like, what would you say? Like pod existence, human battery, Wall-E type stuff going on.
Yeah.
Well, it's like another it's like another step of what we were talking about before, people not reciting stories anymore that they keep in their heads. This was the argument that was given by Socrates, where he was lamenting the invention of writing. And it seems like every step of the way it gets worse and worse and worse. Like the television set, the radio, we don't need to use our imagination to create the stories, or the stories that have been passed on either through vocalization or through a book. Now we have sounds that we listen to, and we get those stories that way. Television adds another layer. Now we can't use our imagination to visualize things anymore. We rely on all this externalization, and again, I would prefer people to watch your animations as opposed to many other animations and movies, while we still have this ability to do so. That being said, but now the next step with the internet is we can click something, get it instantly, and so all these other processes inside of us seem to be degrading, where all we are left with, honestly, for the most part, and you could see this on Twitter with people with all their hashtags, hashtag BLM, hashtag whatever, like all the hashtag people, they seem to be like puppets now, like tubes through which information goes through, comes out the other end, and goes into some other tube. And so the whole idea of what does it mean to be a human being, what does it mean to live, all of a sudden goes by the wayside if we're just receptacles of one piece of information from one end to the other, and that's why I think it's going to fall apart.
But I feel like the reaction to this is equally in some ways, without offending too many people on our side of things, I feel that the reaction to it is equally towards propensity to get involved in certain e-relations and parasocial relations and cults of personality, but also a sort of weird like Gnosticism where, because the culture is so ingratiated with the obsessions and sexual neuroses, then therefore I have to totally mortify the body in another way. Like recently, as everyone's been following on our side of Twitter, this recent tweet someone did comparing modern pornography to Renaissance art, saying, well, it's the same thing. And it was some Orthodox person. But it's I feel that that's an extreme response to an extreme age. And as much as I virulently disagree with the take, I do notice that you can't, my advice would be, you can't LARP these things. I mean, you can't become a sort of like stereotype of what you want to achieve in life, whether it's an activist or a trad or whatnot. And I feel that these extreme schizophrenic responses to what's going on nowadays is further compounded by the age that we live in and the information overload that younger people are experiencing all the time. So in the internet, it seems that you gravitate towards the absolute fringes and everything for a reason, because the threshold of information is high, whereas with anonymity, the threshold of personal effect and comportment towards your own life with what you're putting out there is very low. So you can have very extreme opinions, unless you get doxxed, but you can sort of have extreme views of life because it just turns into this like giant MMORPG where you're just going on the internet and your life outside of the internet is completely different. But lo and behold, now everyone's life is on the internet. So your life is the internet itself. So it's the weird, like, it's basically like a melting pot of schizophrenia, in my opinion. But I don't know how to
when I think about people's behavior, their terrible behavior on social media, I'm aware that these people are sitting there, like, humans have never been in this position where we're being this stimulated without moving our bodies at all.
The wirehead, we're wireheads.
So we're getting like flooded with adrenaline while just sitting here.
I just want to fight. I want to fucking fight with someone, man. Like, I'm sick of sitting around. But the problem is, I go out for jokes. I can only do so much on my own. I'm fucking waiting. I'm like, when people like Chad, I disagree with them. I just want to be like, you know what? Let's fucking fight. Because it's like, forget like him. I don't believe in sorting works, but I think fighting is a valid thing to like, if
you should be fighting
wrong,
physically.
I fight people, exactly.
Yeah, physically.
Don't be like
of
talking bullshit words.
That's why I tell people to do martial arts. Because it's
but it's like fucking contact sports are fucking banned right now because the whole corona
thing.
So I have to
that is a problem. You can't
Yeah.
really do jujitsu by yourself.
I mean, I was doing boxing, right, like briefly while this was happening. It was
Oh.
shit, and it was so mollycoddled. This like big Santa guy was like, "Well, you can do what you want and stuff." No, I don't want to be insulted when I'm doing shit, but I do need someone to go, "No, you're going to do this. This is what you need to do." Someone to push me, because I fucking want that, because I'm like fucking want to exercise, and it's just I'm
Okay.
sick of everything being, oh, second place, oh, everyone gets an award. I fucking beat the shit out of me and like make me actually need to do more fucking push-ups and shit. Honestly, I need to I need some.
Maybe
like, fucking
Nina,
motivation.
Nina can resurrect her Dom persona and
No,
encourage.
not like that. No, fight.
that.
I think what he needs a father figure. He needs a man.
And
There it
unfortunately,
To tell
Jordan
him what to
Peterson
do.
is becoming the father figure for.
I don't need someone to
a
tell
lot
me
of
what to do. I
women.
need to fight against them. I don't know.
Oh, wait, by the way,
A
speaking
mentor,
Jordan,
that's what I need.
speaking Jordan Peterson, now that he's back, and I know it's a forbidden topic, but can somebody explain the Wendigo psychosis? So
No,
that
do
Nina,
not research.
so that Nina understands what exactly is going on there.
I'm
supposed-
familiar with Wendigo.
You know what a Wendigo is?
Yeah,
Should we tell her? Okay.
Yeah,
it's
Go
Wendigo
for it.
psychosis.
So there's this idea that if you among certain tribes, that if you eat human flesh, that is how you become the Wendigo, right? A Wendigo is a shaman who has partaken in that most like forbidden of flesh. So the idea is, in Jordan Peterson's travels upon the earth, he has eaten of the flesh of humanity, and now he is becoming like it explains everything. You know, it's one of those. His disappearance. Where was he? He was undergoing
Wait, is
a
this something Jordan
transformation.
Peterson's saying, or is something people are saying about him?
No, it's people. Something people are saying about Jordan.
Yeah,
Peterson.
that's a little concerning.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Watch out! He's coming in the night. Jordan Peterson is gonna break in and eat you. That's the truth of this one.
It's funny.
I'm a fan of that one. It's pretty funny.
I think I got more exercise this year than any previous year. Like lots of exercise and lots of
You
outdoor.
have that bike, right?
Yeah, bicycling. It's great.
Yeah, just stay off the road, because for some people, for some reason, people in cars just have a frothing rage and hatred for people on bikes.
Yeah.
but
Well,
It's
Driving
just
next to
manifests.
a bicyclist is kind of like.
Yes, I
yeah,
agree.
it's-
I've done it many times.
but have you
like
driven
riding
next to a
bikes.
velomobile? The velomobile confuses them
A what?
because the velomobile has hard edges and they're not sure what it is, and they give it much more room. Or I mean, it has curved edges, but it has solid edges, right? Like they don't see the vulnerable flesh of the bicyclist. They just see the opaque
Oh,
fairing of
Hmm.
the velomobile.
that's interesting. No, I've never used one of those things.
Oh, I love it.
Wow,
it's
what a
my
strange
cold weather
looking
ride.
vehicle. I'm looking at it right now, and I can see why it's kind of confusing.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'd be like not near that thing either. If I was in yeah, I would
God.
just get away from that thing. Like, what the fuck?
Oh, boy.
Giant semen.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a suppository.
exactly.
It has red dots all over it now, though. I put red.
Drive
reflective
away
dots.
from it as
Oh.
much as possible.
So now it looks like it has a contagious disease as well, so you'll stay even
Mm.
farther away.
We do have a comment earlier on. By the way, we do have a comment from, I don't know if this is a fan of yours,
Warlock, yeah.
Fragile Sandy, who says, "Let Nina talk." I don't know if you know who Fragile Sandy is.
I don't know
No?
who Fragile Sandy is, but I do have to say that if you go back into this podcast and analyze like actual time, I would be curious if you timed how long the different speakers are speaking.
I'm
I
pretty
think
sure.
I mean, I go ahead and interrupt, and I'm also the guest, so I feel entitled. If I weren't the guest, I would feel less entitled. But,
No, I think this is good.
I mean, I know that
it's
Hotep
not-
Sophia didn't talk as much as some of the rest of you.
Yeah,
And this is probably, you know, it's a pretty common bias. So probably this is a woman watching it, noticing that men are speaking more than women. Although I am speaking a lot, but I do feel entitled because I'm your goddamn special guest.
Yes, you are. Well, so, Sophia,
Oh,
what do you
boy.
think?
Don't worry about me. I always talk too much. So
No, you're- no, we're not
come
saying
on.
no, in the
Oh.
streams, I always Didn't somebody just complain about my random tangents?
Everyone
No, but
fucking
that's the
does
whole
it.
point.
Forget
Everyone
my
does
point.
it.
Everybody does
Yeah.
it.
Oh.
No, my
It's the
point.
monologues.
I mean, look
My-
at me, my God.
No, my point, Hotep Sophia, is that they're perceiving you as talking like 3 times more than you're actually talking. So what I want them to do is analyze, is actually measure how many minutes each one of us talked,
Don't.
and that the perception of you, like, because they're going to perceive you talking more than you're actually talking because you're a woman.
Yeah, that's common. I mean, men, if you say 10 extra words, a man is like, why are you still talking? Like, you should be done with it. No, I mean, my boyfriend does this all the time. I'm like, talking about something. He's like, you're still talking about that? And I'm like, what do you mean? I didn't even finish my sentence. Like, well, usually it's food. So he's like, why are you still talking about food? I'm like, because I'm telling you about this kind of butter versus that kind of butter and the process of making the butter. So this is like, I mean, but in my own defense, everyone does that to me because people don't even understand what I'm talking about. So if I'm having a conversation, they're like, you made a connection I didn't make. I don't even know what you're talking about. So I just try and trim it down into like one sentence, sentences with no follow-up. So that way people can come back to me and like my mom did this. She's like, oh, I remember one time you used to talk about water. I was like, yeah, because like the water in our county is like recycled water. It's completely disgusting. And so I started drinking this pH water. Anyway, so I was like, yeah, you guys got to drink better water. So it comes back to me like 4 years later. I remember you saying that about water. I'm like, this was 4 years ago. Like now you just like thinking about the fact that our water is like recycled, even though we're right beside the water. It makes no sense. But so I thought it was just a me problem. I didn't realize it was a female problem.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something Patrice O'Neill, the comedian Patrice O'Neill, talked about a lot. How when it comes to the dating dynamics, what women get a lot from the relationship isn't so much the sex as it is like the sex to them is the conversation, and it is the time that the guy is devoting to listening to women during the conversation, that there is a satisfaction that women would have from that kind of experience. I don't know, like, would you agree, Hotep Sophia, or...
If the man is interested, but if they're not interested in what I have to say, then it's probably not quite as helpful it depends on what type of person you're dealing with too, because as an educated woman, most of the guys I talk to are lopsided as far as education is concerned. So if I'm talking about like something school related, they'll have no idea what I'm talking about. It's just a total waste of time. So you're better off at least finding someone who is coherent and can make coherent statements and can at least wrap their head around what you're saying, as opposed to having a whole gigantic conversation with you about it. Because I think women also expect too much, especially when you're in lopsided relationships where you have more education than your partner. They don't know what you're talking about and they really don't care. And it's really like ignorant of you to try and make them care about like some nuanced thing that you're talking about that they don't ever have to experience. So I think that's like sort of a problem, because so many more women are educated now. They just expect people to know what they're talking about. And I know no one knows what I'm talking about at all ever. So I can just approach it from that.
I'd also say when you're saying educated women, I'd say, Sophia, you are more than educated. You're actually wise and you have common sense within you, unlike people in general who get educated. But just because you're educated, I don't think that makes you any wiser than
but
anybody
like my
else.
OG doesn't even have like his diploma. You know what I mean? Like he's not educated. So when
OG?
My boyfriend, I call him like. Anyway, my boyfriend.
I just don't know what OG stands for.
Original gangster, because
from
the streets. So, yeah, he doesn't. He's smart. He knows a lot more than me on a lot of stuff. But it's like, it's just. A lot of people, they can't put themselves in these type of situations because they want to be able to talk about the same things. And I don't care He doesn't care about food or business or any of the stuff that I care about, but he'll listen, he'll ask questions, but do I expect him to like go out and read the books that I read or be remotely interested in the stuff that I'm in? No, that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like but I'm realistic. Like I said, a lot of people who are educated, they just don't have the realistic expectations of how to deal with people. And I do think that has to do with dealing with so many, especially my generation, so many internet interactions, because when you deal with people on the internet, you're able to sort out people who would ordinarily, you wouldn't come into contact with them. You know, you're able to just find your little niche group and stay in your little group, as opposed to in real life, you would have to sort of deal with the normies that are around you. But with the internet, like they have like Black Twitter, you could go seek out Black Twitter and then you never have to leave Black Twitter. You know what I mean? You just get, or Caliac, you get involved with these little, especially the small accounts, and people are just running their mouth all day. You never have to actually interact with people who are not like you and they don't have your level of understanding or interest.
And then they create parasocial relationships towards bigger accounts, and yeah.
And then you have the Jannies, carrier pigeons. Yeah, there are all these terminologies now, Nina, when it comes to the people who would kind of serve these bigger fish live streamers. Carrier pigeons would be like, how would you describe carrier pigeons, Gio?
A Janny that carries messages between people when it's not advantageous for the e-celeb cult of personality to be seen contacting certain people or groups. So
that feels like a very advanced terminology that only like 5 people use, the carrier pigeon thing. Is that a common term?
Well, no, carrier pigeon is an older thing from the Mafia days as well.
Yeah.
Because carrier pigeons always send messages to,
I think more about flying monkeys.
That's I'm a big fan of Wizard of Oz is nice. But another thing I wanted to touch on, we have a question over here from Sandy. Ask Nina about her film in progress called Uterus.
Uterus, yes, Uterus.
Uterus.
So that's one of that is a project that I started and didn't finish. For the first time in my life, I have not been finishing projects, and that's not like me. I don't know what's going on, but I had this whole vision for a film. I started working on it. It's about, a woman's relationship with her uterus and it tormenting her until she gets rid of it. Because again, since my uterus was removed a couple years ago, it's been like, this is great. Like, I spent my whole life with this fucking uterus and I hated it. And
oh my God, degenerate.
So I was making a movie about that, but I didn't finish it, but I would like to. And then I started another movie about the apocalypse, literally the apocalypse, the Book of Revelation. I started that this year when the pandemic was new and things felt really apocalyptic. And I did some lovely animation for that too. And I also didn't finish it. I will say I finally finished something this year. I made a music video for a European pop star, but she is not releasing that video until probably January. So it's under wraps until that goes out. But at least I freaking finished something. And then I have these unfinished projects, and I'm not sure what's going on with my muse, but they're not finished. And it's too bad, because I think about, it's like, yeah, I'd like to see this uterus film. I have a problem with making films that, I stopped doing, because it's like, oh, what if it's not good? I started it in a different way. Most of my movies start with music, and this one didn't start with music. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have music to animate to. And that was part of the challenge I set up for myself. And I, in a cowardly fashion, just didn't do it because I'm scared of making something that's bad. And that's not good. That's not a good trait at all. I should just go ahead and embrace it and go like, okay, I'm gonna make bad film. It's okay if it's bad.
But your work is really incredible.
Issues.
Like all the styles that you employ. That's another thing, by the way, for those who have not seen Nina Paley's work. You employ like the style in Cedar Sings the Blues. as well as like you could say the goat that you have in sadomasochism of Lade Reiniger, who did The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, which I
Well,
think
and
was like the
there were
first.
shadow puppets before Lottie Ridinger too.
Sure,
She was basing
yeah.
everything on shadow puppets.
And it's a very beautiful site, as well as the more painterly stuff from Sita Sings the Blues. Like I put that Hanuman. I really love that Hanuman painting that you did holding up the staff, and and the cartoon style as well, which is kind of like R. Crumb-ish. I don't know like what the best way to describe it is, but you put all of these different styles together, and they work together really well. And like when it comes to the new films that you're making, do you want to keep doing a mix of these different styles? Do you want to add anything else? Like, do you want to experiment more with different kinds of animation mediums?
Well, Uterus is a different style, but it's one that people might not like, It's not pretty. It just seemed appropriate. Yeah, I mean, I use different styles for different things. Sure. Yeah, I keep doing that. I mean, and then there's even another project that I started that I might not finish, which is what I'm working on now in the research stage, which is a movie about recumbent bicycles.
Nice. I like that Tim and Eric sketch called Corpse. I don't know if you're a Tim and Eric fan. Are you, Nina? No?
I'm not. I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't really see it. But Corpse? What?
Corpse. So it's cops on recumbent bicycles. Corpse. And it's so I'll send you the video. I don't even know if I should spoil it for you, but it's like they're on these bikes, they're like helping these girls learn to play tennis or whatever. Then they get called because they have to like go into this drug bust that the Mexican mafia or whatever.
Don't give it away. No,
okay,
stop. I should watch it. That's awesome. Okay. It's so hard to find any depiction of recumbent bikes in culture, but whenever they are depicted, their image is not good.
So, yeah. What you mentioned Robert Crumb. Is he an influence on you?
Crumb? I like Robert Crumb. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I would say.
Robert Crumb.
He's an early influence.
I feel it's kind of weird, like how he was like at one point, he was another like canceled figure for a little bit, but.
And he lived through the 60s. Like, he lived through the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll thing. Kind of like Nina.
He was resentful that he wasn't a hippie, but that's,
I wasn't a good hippie either. So, yeah, Crumb, the thing is, no matter the content of his art, and there's legit criticism of it as some of it being genuinely misogynistic. Mm-hmm. But even that stuff.
Or racist, even like...
Well, no,
like but food McSpade.
Except that that was always such satire, right?
Yeah.
It was always with the race stuff. It was always clear that he was on like another level and he was satirizing something. But the woman thing,
it wasn't like a Wyatt Man like posting.
Right. Yeah. And his stuff has been very like he did a really satirical piece called "When Jews Take Over America."
Oh boy.
Which was pure satire, right?
But satire.
It was seized by these white supremacists who didn't realize it was satire, and then Crumb got in all this trouble because satire is very difficult for people. They really don't get it. But anyway, I think he was always being very satirical regarding race, but less so regarding sex, which I think he acknowledged, right? Because he did all these comics, wow, yeah, I've really fucked up attitude towards women. Like he knows that.
Again, he has a paraphilia towards like the Longhouse mother fertility goddess body, Amazonian,
like and the big thighs.
And the way he depicts them.
He even does comics about a shoe fetish, which is interesting. Yeah. But anyway, regardless of the content, his drawings are just so beautiful. And it's one of those things where it's like, no matter what, I had a feminist cartoonist friend who was like his arch enemy in a way, or his arch frenemy. But no matter what she said about it, I was like, what, those drawings, they look so great. It's like, yeah.
I remember in the documentary they interviewed one of my favorite art critics, Robert Hughes, and he said he was like the Bruegel and the Goya of our time, which is true. And it's funny how they interviewed his former, I think it was his girlfriend, but then she was his ex-wife, and she was talking about how her body was similar to the ones that he depicts, and how she became a cartoonist, and she was influenced by that. And it was really weird.
I don't think you mean his ex-wife. I think you mean his wife. You mean Aileen Comiskey-Crumb.
No.
No?
This is
his ex-wife was also a cartoonist?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah. She
okay.
became a cartoonist, and she did like that 70s, 80s, like feminist, like I'm exploring my body sort of cartooning. And so she was saying how weird it was that Crumb could fetishistically render almost seamlessly that type of figure. And it was interesting to look at the gaze in such an intense way through his work, like the way he every female character of his is imbued with that like same sense, almost like I would say almost verging on the grotesque, but not really. The way he does it, it's I don't think it's necessarily misogynistic, because these women have incredible power over him. It's almost like a femdom sort of thing.
Which actually is, that's the thing. Like it kind of is. But anyways, it's like.
But then that itself opens up the discussion to, is that sort of approach to femininity in itself another product of a masculine sort of conquering? Because now it's like the feminine becomes what Paglia called the female transvestite in sexual persona, where dominatrixes, they take on this, or femdom, they take on these masculine traits, and it's still a degradation of the feminine, but it's like this weird, like back alley sort of approach to the masculine conquering the feminine, because now the feminine takes on the characteristic of the masculine, and it's not healthy for anyone. And of course, Paglia, she's researching de Sade and Juliet and his novels and things like that. So it's really interesting how nowadays you still have this discourse where, feminist discourse is basically trying to turn women into men and competing, like the corporate girl boss feminism is like, now women are competing in the world of men. And it's like, it's really interesting how that became the predominant feminist discourse, not something else. I don't know. It's real. I'm just, my brain turns to mush after 3 hours. So it's just.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting a little tired too. I should probably.
Well, guys, before we go, I do want to go to last comments, last statements. But I also first want to thank Nina Paley for being here with us and for talking with us. And it is just so amazing that you were willing to give your time to this conversation. And I would be very interested in just what you thought in general of this, because I don't know if you've been to a stream like this before, and what the dynamics felt like for you.
Oh, this is great. I'm like, okay, the kids are all right.
The kids are alt-right.
Oh God.
Oh dear.
I'm kidding. The alt-right is dead. Don't worry about it.
No, but again, it's like it's a pushback. Not all of you.
It's nice. It's like certainly it's a diversity of thought that I don't see very often.
Yeah.
I mean, what with having a counter Semite and everything. It's like, I'm never going to live this down. I'm also going like, wow, this just participating in here is going to be used against me a lot.
Oh God. Well, see, what we're trying to do right now is when we actually have people in here who are, like, as you said, like counter-Semites and all that kind of stuff, what's important for me is that dialogue is not squashed. We're able to actually have it right in front of everybody else, right in front of the public, and to really be able to figure out here, what are some of the things that I think historically, my perspective on is that they've been pushed so much on people as this is forbidden, you must not talk about A, B, and C. And as a result, I think people go into their small circle and it ferments over time, and it does result in a pushback that if things get really bad, like if things get to the extent that like things are going on in South Africa right now as far as the white farmers there, like if things get that bad here in America as far as the way that the politics go, then there is going to be a pushback. And when that pushback happens, my biggest concern is that people who are, regardless of whether they're Jewish or black or whatever, like people who have nothing but good things to want to offer to our world, to our civilization, that they are going to be lumped in with the ultra left who do want to only destroy, and they show themselves as being these paragons of virtue. Meanwhile, all they're doing is destroying. And I really hate, like I said before, these groups of people being lumped in together as this monolith, whether we're talking about black people or Jewish people or whatever. Like, let's judge people based on the things that they say. Like, I don't know if this is going to have an effect on everybody who's listening, but I already know it has had a tremendous effect on people who got back to me and told me that, like, they didn't even know that many Jewish people before, and, like, they only got their information about the Jews from going to 4chan or whatever. And, you know what I mean? Like, because of
Imagine that.
Yes. And what did they get in response? Whenever they would offer, like, more milquetoast versions of whatever they were talking about on 4chan into the public sphere, what do they get? They get instant, you are a racist, bigot, anti-Semite, whatever. There is no opportunity at all for these people to be able to have a dialogue like we're having right now and just be able to dissect things.
The South African farmers, that's a white supremacist conspiracy. Don't you know that? There's no white farmers being killed in South Africa. Didn't you know that? So anyways, that's besides the point.
So Lev, you remind me a bit of my friend Alex Gleason, whose website is gleasonator.com, which is part of the Fediverse. So if you want to start exploring the Fediverse, make yourself an account at gleasonator.com. And because Alex he's saying the same things, and people hate him. I mean, not everybody hates him. I think he's awesome. But, for even talking to people, they hate him for talking to people and for saying that it's actually okay to talk to people. And check that out, check him out. But this overall is making me quite hopeful. And it's also really enjoyable to talk to people that are not saying exactly the same things that I've heard before and that are actually engaging and thinking and So it's been really fun. If it hadn't been this fun, I wouldn't have hung around this long. I'm really surprised by how long I've hung around, but this has been very fun.
I'm really, really thankful for that. And you know what? I think we do have to kind of burn the ships in the, that we came in here. Like I'm also from the New York animation community, and I am still I am the chair somehow of the Art and Technology Committee at the National Arts Club in Gramercy Park while I'm doing all this stuff. And I think the reason is because I do believe in a way sort of in fate, in us being put into a position where we are able to bring people together in such a way and engage people who otherwise would never think of engaging with somebody, who has a lot of these much more, let's say, extreme viewpoints. And the more we do this, we're all already canceled when it comes to the lunatics running the asylum. We're already canceled for them. So let's not worry about them. Instead, let's gather together all the rogue elites, or whatever you want to call it, all the people who actually have money and are tired of a lot of this extremism and may be willing to put their money where they think the future ought to be. And I think it is with Break the Rules, and I think it is with Nina Paley, and I think it is with all the people who are willing to have conversations with people they may not necessarily agree with for the sake of expanding the dialogue. And with that, I want to say again, all the people who are watching this right now, don't forget to subscribe. Subscribe right now. Subscribe, and click the bell. And also share with us with all your friends. We got to expand. We got to keep growing. And it is a great pleasure to be here.
And by the way,
Nina Paley and everybody else. Yes.
And by the way, the chat, there's next level geo posting in the chat. I can't believe this is amazing.
Nice.
Let's see. Geo is a stream of consciousness. Geology, Geojitsu. Geo is the left hand of nature. My favorite one by Schizo Rick. Geo is an anthropomorphized Easter Island statue. I kind of do look like an Easter Island statue.
Oh man.
But this has been a great stream. I feel like we didn't.
Yes.
But to our detractors though from last week, I feel like we didn't bully women enough in this stream.
Yeah, that's
So
true. We should have been.
we didn't bully women enough. So Hotep
Yeah.
Sophia, Nina, I'm sorry. We should have cranked up the women hate a bit more.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
should have took the energy
Martin
from
K-
the Jew hate to the woman hate. So
Martin K has a good comment. Martin K says, she, by she he means Nina, she's a trooper and have a new fan in me. He's from Norway, by the way. Very, very beautiful place up
Good.
there. Hope we can all visit there, hang out with Shabana and Martin and her dogs. I think that'll be a good time. So anyway, with that being said, go to patreon.com/breaktherules right now. Here is the link, and here are the rewards. that you will
$50
get.
patrons will get all the rewards. By the way.
Yes, all the rewards go to the $50 patrons. Oh, this thing, apparently I have to click into properties and make sure it actually loops because it was not looping before. This is what happens when you put in a new instance into OBS. But anyway, here it is. You could see $20 tier reward. My father's very beautiful, exquisite magnets made out of wood. $30 tier reward. Giovanni Panicciotti's beautiful prints. Look at him in action. And $50 custom reward and all of the above as well. And the 2 wooden things are brought to you every single year. So every year, if you keep being a patron, you are going to keep getting all this stuff. And once again, guys, I want to say this was fantastic. I'm so happy that we got to do it on the laptop. My computer is going to be fixed, and this works. And that is a very good thing. And Nina, it is such a pleasure and such an honor to be here once again with you. And I will end the stream right now, and I just want to wish everybody the very best in your life, in your career, with your family. I'm stalling for time because I'm trying to find the link to the stream to end it. I think I am here. Yes, here we go. Everybody, subscribe right now. We are ending the stream. Subscribe right now. Mwah, I love
God
you.
bless
Bye-bye.
and goodbye.
God
Goodbye.
bless.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Here we go. I ended that
All right.
and stopped streaming.